So everyone should have gotten a pop-up message saying that we are now live streaming. There's an icon in the upper left corner of your screen. I will be popping, well, I will not be in this. Catherine Restrepo, my colleague at the school, will be taking screenshots to share on social media. And if you don't want your work or your image used on social media, do private message her in the Zoom chat so she knows. And I will give hosting capability back to Nick, and good luck to everyone.
Thanks, Naomi. All right, let's see. Just making sure everybody's here. I think we have everyone. All right, well, let's get started. You guys heard the intro and a little bit about the reviewers, but I'll just say quickly again, thank you all for joining us. You all know Professor Lyles, of course. We're also joined by Sergio Padilla. He's an alum of the school. He is currently faculty at LSU, has also been practiced in private practice in New Orleans and Austin and Mexico City and other places. What else? Sergio has been a member of Civic Studio and other nonprofit work in town as well. Anything else you want to add?
That covers it. Excited to be here. Thanks.
Sure. And also Tony Dimaggio, she is likewise an alum of Tulane. She also has a degree in, well, I'll let you say that part, Tony. I don't want to mess it up, but is an architect and has her own practice here in town, and has also practiced with firms in town, including Wayne Troyer Associates. Has a preservation specialty, but does all kinds of work. And I will let you add anything, Tony, if you'd like to.
No, that's great. Thank you, Nick, and good to be here too. Yeah,
thank you guys. So nothing really to add. Carrie certainly covered it. I know I've Lyles is probably tired of hearing me say it, but I know in my section, I sort of harped on the site aspect, right? And really trying to make sure that the project as proposed was logical in its placement or meaningful in its placement, tied to the research and or tied to significant views, experiential qualities of the site, et cetera. And so I hope to see a little bit of that in y'all's presentations. And we've got about 15 minutes each. And so again, 2-3 minutes, you can go 4 if you want, and leave some time for conversation. I'll keep time. I'll drive. So just make sure to say, hey, dummy over here, both for reviewers and students. If you want me to look at something specific, I'm going to hover on kind of the whole board. I know the reviewers are probably looking at concept board separately anyway, but I will, for the sake of Zoom, hover on the whole board for just a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds before we zoom into any particular drawing. So remember to cover the kind of top line items that you want us to know about your project before you say like, okay, take me into the plan. And so direct me as we go. And let me share my screen and we'll get started. If you didn't notice, I did very recently put the review order to the left of the boards. And so Ben Breimer, you're lucky number 1, and we'll start with you. So let me share my screen and we can get going. Any other questions, concerns? Great. Find Ben. Let me just make this as big as we can. Y'all see? Okay, great. Ben, why don't you jump in?
Hello, can you hear me okay? Perfect. So this building is situated at the bottom of the Jefferson Island hillside in a quiet zone that provides equal access to the old mine air shaft, the gardens, and the Jefferson House. The entire building is mostly embedded and only reveals itself at certain points. The front facade overlaps the boundary between land and water, so that an existing pathway at the site that runs along the shoreline is intercepted by the building. So as you're traveling on this pathway, you flow into the entrance. Once you enter, you descend down a ramp into the excavated space of the lobby. I think it's shown best in plan, probably. And this ramp is bordered by sort of this front retaining wall that holds back the lake. And you can see through some clerestory windows the surface of the lake touching this retaining wall. And along that retaining wall, there's a waterfall feature flowing down. So you're sort of entering along this waterfall right next to the surface of the lake. So you sort of get the sense that the lake is flowing into the building or overflowing past this wall. And you get the feeling that this entire building, like the old salt mine, is entirely at the mercy of the lake. Once you circulate past the front desk, you enter a long hallway and descend down a series of ramps past this linear chain of exhibits. So each one of those sort of blocks is an exhibit space. There are 4, and these hold the mine cage, the mine cart, the salt dome, and the mining tools. If you could go to the section in the right, to the right, I think it shows the exhibit the best. So this figure standing looking into one of the exhibits past one of the ramps, you can see there are sort of multiple conditions that reference the old salt mine. So there's the exhibits are enclosed by these metal mesh cages referencing the salt or the mine cages. And then the exhibits lie underneath these light wells, which permeate up through the hill and reach the surface to let light in. And under those light wells, there's the little excavated pool of water. So this idea that there's this sort of penetration through the hill, letting light in, and it's this hole with water underneath. So it's sort of referencing the drill bit that entered the mine and flooded the mines in 1980. Looking back at the plan, once you're down past all of the exhibit spaces, which each one of those exhibits is sort of embedded further into the hill than the last. So you're descending, and then you get to this sort of space all the way at the end, which is an interlude space where you have the option of using the bathroom, sitting on a bench, looking at the salt wall, or entering the reading room or the video exhibition, which are those back 2 rooms for this. And then the small side rooms to the right are storage and mechanical. And then circling back around, you enter another long hallway, which shoots you all the way back out to the level you entered in to an outdoor cafe space. So as you're climbing up that ramp again, the light at the end of the tunnel is from the outdoor cafe, which is bordered in front by the same retaining wall holding back the lake as what's in the lobby. So it also has that waterfall coming down. And then tucked behind the cafe are the kitchen and the office spaces, which are bordered by clerestory windows next to this excavated outdoor sitting area for office workers. And the exit there to the right just sends you out. Either you have the option of that outdoor sitting area, or you can round the corner and climb those ramps up to the level of the shoreline pathway again to be on your way. And that's it. Thank you.
Is there anything, I'll probably say this to everyone, is there anything else you want to point out, particular location of?
Yeah, the section perspective there, which you're hovering near, shows the lobby space and the cafe space and the level of the lake with the waterfall wall in front. So you sort of see the lake and the waterfall coming down in front there. And then the section to the left of that shows the series of exhibits descending into the hillside. So as you're moving from one to the other, they get deeper and deeper. And then the last thing that might be helpful to see is the perspective underneath, which shows the exit ramp. So you're sort of looking back towards the building with this obstruction hiding most of it. But once you round that corner, you can see the cafe and the outdoor sitting area.
Okay, feel free to orient yourselves, look around a little bit. Before we jump in.
It happened again. As soon as it becomes time to comment, my neighbor starts weed eating. It's the other neighbor this time, so I'm dying to know.
Ask them what they think.
Yeah, exactly. I know the students have heard from me a bunch, but maybe I'll just jump in on the first one. Ben, I'm intrigued what you said about flow, and the plan itself seems pretty compact, pretty tight. I wonder if there's something I feel like maybe you could really push this notion of flows to maybe either do it through sight lines or space or space, right? Two different ways. Like it almost feels like I'm traveling to compartment, right? Like I go into the lobby and then I leave the lobby into a hallway, and then I go into the exhibit space and I leave the exhibit space. And is there ever opportunity where maybe if we go to the building section, and the way I'll talk about it visually, let's see, I'm trying to get my markers. A visual way would be, I would love to stand in the lobby, if that's what that is, and then have I got to do better than that. That's crumbly, right? And is there any way I could have visual access? Except I don't want it quite. I'm gonna get it under control, people. Hold on one second. Right? Oops. Visual access, right? Maybe from the lobby. Why is it still? I'll stop drawing so you get the point, right? So maybe are there points where I can have visual access and look from, notions to guide me through the space? That is there any point you can, tease me and draw me into the space by sightline or objects elsewhere in the space? I know you kind of harped on flow, so I think there are interesting ways to where this project could start to flow either in visual. So I guess what I did there is, instead of this being a solid wall and this being a solid wall, could we start to perforate those to make relationships through the space? Maybe somehow the employees keep an eye on, I don't know, one of the more sacred exhibits, like the John James Audubon books. There are only like 9 in existence or something. Or, is there any way to just get a lateral flow of space and start to perforate that wall?
Even if it's just a peekaboo.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a peekaboo, because it would also aid in your meter. Like you've kind of started to develop a meter, at least on the left side, right? And maybe you can have these little gaps of light, and they could then, like little gaps of light, maybe right when you hit the landing. Or so now when I'm coming back up and I've learned this history and I've seen the salt wall, I now am gained with this knowledge. And as I come back up this ramp, I'm looking back into this history of archives, armed with this new knowledge.
Yeah. And that makes total sense about sort of the different spaces sort of connecting to one another in that way. I do see how it's pretty condensed and forced in some way. Yeah.
I also think that since you're, sorry, Nick.
No, go ahead, please.
I also think, just going off of Andrew's comment, since you're working with these thickened walls, you can really use the way that the perforation is angled so that in one direction, you're maybe not getting anything that's distracting, and in the other direction, you're getting the peaks and vice versa. So you're already kind of like setting yourself up to be able to curate that experience with just very slight changes to how your perforations are shaped and angled through that wall.
Right.
Yeah, I had a comment, but I had a question first, which is, what's the total elevation change between the front door and the lowest part of your building in the back?
It's roughly 5 feet.
Okay. So one thing I think is that over that expansive space, it might not necessarily be as obvious of an elevation change, because you have the shallow slope, and in one regard that's good because it makes a more accessible space and you can't have anything too drastic. But I would think maybe like the next iteration of development might be using those light wells to kind of force perspectives so that you really do feel like that you're moving further underground and away from the surface as you go down. So instead of having to use the actual landscape of your floor, and you could keep that, close to what you have it now, but then start employing other elements in the experience to give you really that feel. I think that there would be something really powerful about feeling like you're kind of going through this excavation, and sets up well with your use of those light wells that are similar to the shafts from the mines.
I love that, Ben, just in conjunction with, I know part of what you were going for or trying to do is, well, let me just say this. There was a version where it went much deeper into the earth, and it was difficult with ADA and all these other considerations, and also just simplification of scheme. But yeah, it's a great point. So now it descends less, but there are other tools at your that you can use in order to enhance that, because you're trying to constrict this, right?
And I would imagine the water table is probably pretty shallow here as well. So I mean, you wouldn't want to put the Audubon books at the bottom at the bottom of something like that and just tempt fate. So yeah, no, and I think that I like that. I think the setup is there to really give people that linear experience, and you can start employing the elements you already have there for the light and shadow, to further emphasize kind of your overall party for the design.
Yeah, Ben, really interesting project. I love the narrative, but I think organizationally, like all the little issues you've heard about, mainly the plan layout. As you were going through your story and I was looking at the plan, I wasn't quite seeing the spaces you were describing. They do come up in your other drawings very nicely, but just one idea too about the flow is, using the sky wells and water features maybe to your advantage to enhance the journey and not for them to be sort of like static in the same position along the way. So maybe they flip to be more, I don't know.
He didn't pin his drawings.
Oops.
Okay.
My bad. So that you maybe have to weave around the water. Maybe the ramp is the whole, aisle hallway. So there's not a distinction between like ramp and hallway. And that would probably make a nicer sort of entry sequence. And then your program on the right equally seems a little sort of confined. And so when you're talking about like sort of these like breakout spaces and other areas, I think you are trying to cram a little too much in this area. So I think a little simplification and really making the circulation the thing that shines in the project. You're implying some cool spaces with the sort of the lowered ceiling as you go down, and like Tony was saying, maybe that's how you accentuate the compression or elevation change when we can't really go that much deeper. But in section, the elevation drop does look a little sort of wimpy compared to like the image you're trying to sell.
Right.
I think if I'm allowed, Nick, one more comment. I see your metered sequence to the middle of the building, and then it kind of feels like you got to the middle of the building and you're like, oh crap, I got to get out. Like, and so you made this, I'll challenge you that you've made like a fire corridor, like a fire rated monolithic corridor. And I was going to challenge you to, I think the exit sequence, that was one reason I was discussing this perforated wall, to give me an experience on the way out. I think alternatively, I was going to suggest, I guess we could always just leave and come out this outdoor thing that's not really a courtyard. I know you're really trying to draw up this linear thing, but as a breakout space, I don't like, you want me to eat lunch in there as an employee. It might, it just doesn't seem, you had room for a bench. So the only way I can eat, I think you called it a courtyard for the employees, is to sort of sit here and face the wall, like almost like I'm in trouble. Right. So I'm trying to, maybe you could turn that into the outdoor circulation. And alternatively, maybe if it doesn't matter how tight it is, I was going to make that. I wonder if you could make that middle exit hallway either just an outdoor courtyard, like a light well, and maybe you just leave through it. So if we go back to the section, I think the leaving corridor is this one. I don't know if that would, sorry about that. I don't know if that would interrupt your game, but now it's this open lit, it could be glassed in, or this could be a courtyard. And, then like we talked about with flow of spaces, maybe the lobby could poke into that space a little, and there'd start to be maybe a flow of space or something that helps to activate. I think it's just, and I think I'm probably saying the same thing I said the first time, just another way to activate that departure sequence and really have it as the same sort of feeling.
Yeah.
I also think that if you were to do a sun path study, the way you have the building oriented right now, the large expanse of glazing is hitting, I guess, southwest, west, southwest,
Right.
which is kind of really that strong light that'll kind of make it feel, a little bit like it's baking in the afternoon. And so if you were to start kind of looking at what Andrew was talking about, and then also studying the sun paths, you could shift your building or orient it a certain way and start to kind of gain a little bit of relief from that, as well as use the different types of light you're going to get from the sun for the different parts of the building.
Yeah.
I think you go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say it makes sense how it's like there are these windows in front, which is like the lit portion of the building, and it's like the most direct sunlight, and then the opposite end is completely dark. So just finding ways to find other angles for sunlight, other places for sunlight to make it feel a bit more lit throughout.
Although you're right, if you come out into that courtyard and you have that western sun hitting you in the face as you're walking back towards the front of the building, and you're like, that's definitely part of the experience that you're sort of setting up here.
We do have to move on, so thank you all. Thank you, Ben. And we're going to go to Isabel, right next door to the left.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay. If you want to start on my site plan, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the circular descent of the buildings are guided by the physical force caused by the sinkhole. My project is really inspired by the whirlpool. The pathways run along the outside edge of each of the buildings, and they cut through each building, really forcing the attention to the center courtyard and the center of the descending buildings. As you walk along the pathway, you're walking around the edge of the courtyard, looking down into it. If you zoom into the plan for each of the buildings, you could see that the hallway in each of the buildings is implied, not walls blocking off that hallway. In my first building is the lobby and entrance area, along with restrooms and office spaces, mechanical and storage. As you then descend and follow the pathway, my second building has the video area, the archive and reading room, also some more room for mechanical. And then my third building is mechanical storage and the exhibition space. And then once you are down, also in the exhibition space, the cage is placed over one of the drill holes, providing a glimpse into the shafts. And as you follow the pathway to the courtyard, there's then a tunnel that leads out to the cafe area and viewing point where you can look out over to where the whirlpool incident occurred.
Say more, a little more about, so it's cafe and outlook, basically.
So you go through that tunnel, which is completely underground, out into the cafe, and then you could come down those stairs and onto that viewing deck where you overlook the water. And my sections show the cutting through the courtyard and the pathway that leads out to the cafe, as well as the exhibition space with the cage placed over that drill hole.
Okay, can you say just a minute about your perspectives?
Yes, so the perspective in the upper right is showing the cafe and that viewing deck. I cut off the water edge to depict the whirlpool. So when the oil mine hit the salt wall, it sucked the water in, causing a distortion in the water plane. So it's not the end of the world, it's just cresting over the horizon to represent that whirlpool. And then my second perspective, you are viewing it from inside the exhibition space. So you have your salt wall to the right, as well as a display and the cage placed over the drill hole.
Yeah, I don't know if Carrie said about the specific objects, and probably it's obvious to you guys, but just for Tony and Sergio, there's a mining cage, that would travel up and down, and then a salt wall has been interpreted a number of ways. It could be just kind of like a dome that you can, put your hands on, or it could be an entire wall that has a sectional quality, right? That you can kind of see what that might look and feel like. And then there's some other things like a mining cart and things like that. Anything else, Isabel?
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Isabel, what's the relationship of the building forms to each other?
The buildings are rotated to create whirlpool effect.
But they all have kind of a little bit of a funnel shape, and they're different sort of funnels sizes. So what started that idea?
I was kind of just playing around with the shapes of the buildings, and I liked the idea of entering the building and it getting larger, and like you wanting to go more into that space to see what continues, which is what inspired the trapezoid shape. And I stuck with that theme throughout all my buildings.
Yeah, it's a good question though, because it reverses with the final exhibition space, right? So it represents a compression in the other direction. So it's something you can play with in the exhibition. If you want it to become grander towards the end, that would have been, an opportunity to repeat that same conical shape.
Yeah. Sergio, were you finished? I didn't want to.
Yeah, I'm thinking about something else. So
Yeah, no, that was kind of exactly what I was going to say. One, that they get smaller to larger, and then the last one gets larger to smaller. But so then, if they are smaller to larger, at least they're maybe starting to convey this notion of whirlpool. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen, like, when I try and think about how to visualize the word whirlpool, I start to think about a pinwheel. And pinwheels are beautiful. If you've ever like nerded out and just stared at them, they're these beautiful identical shapes, and they kind of fold in on each other, and they perfectly interlock. And maybe that's what I'm kind of hoping for to see, like something where I occupy this first building. I'm in your axon right now. I think this is where I enter. And maybe this end wall, like something becomes, let me undo that. I didn't stop it as rigorously as I wanted to. Maybe this wall kind of comes out and drops. So now there's something that's sort of leading me to the next one, right? And then maybe there's a wall right here, right, that leads me to that one. And I don't think I'm doing these in the right order, but I think that's one of the problems, right? Or one of the criticisms, that is there some way where the architecture could do more than funnel in itself, but actually lead you and signify you into the other one. And I think it could even, I think what would sell it too is if you curated the sequence of the paths between the units rather than revert to a meander. I appreciate you, kind of leaving a light footprint, sequencing to the next ones. But I think I would lean in and, maybe, I don't know if this pathway stays on the inside or the outside, but maybe, right, there's, maybe you make some sort of plaza or something, or maybe there's a walk that ends up literally bringing me to the next one, right? And then maybe there's some stairs or something that bring me to the next one. And this takes me to that last underground tunnel out. And if you're going to whirlpool and create that sequence, I think I would push pretty hard and maybe seize the opportunity of the sequence of the outside parts, right? We used to call it in one of Professor Lynn's studios, scarring the landscape. And that sounds so aggressive, but that's kind of, I love the phrase because it gives you a little more agency and says it's okay to really modify that relationship and rather say, well, I guess I'm only an architect, so I can only do the buildings. So when you leave a building, you just follow the contours. And then a building, I take control again, right? I'd rather you build architecture out there. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Andrew, that's kind of where my first question was leading to is without the narrative of the whirlpool, it's hard to see that as like the driving force of the project.
I feel like the perspective kind of starts to do it where I see this building. And then in the distance, I think that's one way you could kind of sell your perspectives too, is in each perspective. Or I like this. I don't know which way this happened, but wouldn't that be great if, and this is how architecture is, right? You do the perspective and you're like, well, you don't see the next building. So maybe I go back to my site plan and I move the building. So it's in this framed view inside your perspective, right? And it's a cyclical design process. Or maybe that window wasn't there earlier, but it's a whirlpool and you want to lead me to the next building. So you either move it or you adjust it. But I think this is a nice way, if that's what that is, of kind of showing me in the sequence, right?
And one last comment on the sequence or trajectories. I love that you're ending it with this sort of buried tunnel leading to the cafe. But if we could go over to the cafe plan, when you have like this very big move like that or a big idea, be very intentional with what you're coming out to. So like coming out to like just cafe tables, like, depending on who's sitting there, that'll either, that's not as nice an experience as if it was just leading you out to the water. So I think this plan could be reconfigured to where you let that sort of breathe for a moment, and then you realize, oh wait, I'm in a cafe area, so I can hang out here.
A great comment. Yeah, it's like it's sort of set up like Exit Through the Gift Shop right now, where you could really, you know, create. Well, one of my original thoughts that I had wanted to say was, yeah, you really have control over the approach that a visitor takes and how they view this for the first time. And so everything that's been said before kind of is the same vein, where you should really consider like what that perspective is. And I think this is just, you know, the end spot. You get to really curate the experience and the powerful moments throughout. So you kind of have to pick those. And I think the first and the last moment are probably, you know, givens to be those powerful moments. So yeah, making it sort of tweak to a perspective that brings you back to the landscape or the more natural elements. I think it's a nice way of kind of concluding that. And then the other thought I had was, you said you were playing around with the building siting. And I think that it's always really good to kind of get a set of rigorous rules in your mind as to what is going to cause a movement. So is it sun path? Is it topography? Is it a specific relationship to the other building and how you want that sequence to, you know, end and start between them, and then start using those to help, because then eventually the siting becomes something much more underlying order. And at the same time, though, since perspective and experiential qualities are important after you get there, I think, you know, tweaks are absolutely worthwhile to do for experiential purposes as well. But I always think that like having that sort of rigorous base to when you start citing really starts to help kind of give it a basis as a design, even if it's not something that's a large part of your design. So you don't have to have it be some shining moment as to, you know, the important design parts, but it's just something for you to keep you I guess like honest with yourself as to why you're doing certain things. And then it makes it very obvious when you move something in your mind and you really start to see from a larger kind of like perspective what implications those little moves have. So I think it kind of helps you like step out a little bit for your own, you know, use as well. But I just said that.
I was just going to tag on that. I think it could help inform too the you know, I think it took you a long time to figure out if this thing could even work, right? Because you're imposing a new whirlpool in the middle of existing topography. And, you know, you're probably coming to materials on the later side, but you early on had this idea of, you know, if this hangs out over, then it gets to be glass, right? So maybe that only happens, you know, here. For instance, if you're following some set of rules, and maybe because this one overlooks the whole thing, it gets to be this whole end that we're not seeing here gets to be glassed as well. Anyway, so I think what Tony's saying could help you in a couple of ways. I didn't mean to cut you off, Tony.
You didn't. I was just going to say I appreciate and understand your reasoning for citing it. I always just try and think of, you know, kind of like a design comment or you know, something like that to add on that's sort of like a basis comment in terms of how to approach a design, because I do think in the end it really does help you kind of get your head around things and really understand the implications of moves you make, more so than having to be important for the viewer or the experiencer to pick up on. But that wasn't to say that I thought that your concept was clear, so I didn't want it to seem like I didn't think that.
Okay, we're at time. Anything else?
One last comment. This will go just general comment too. Whenever you put people in your renderings, make them as context specific as possible, meaning like diversity or just attire. So having this guy who's coming out of work into this nature center doesn't sell me on this idea of sort of this really special place. So
And even a single entourage, right? Like, you'd hope it would be active, right? So
Yeah, the fact that he's like that, he's the only person shown is the funny part to me. Like, then I can't really picture other people besides this guy in there.
Okay, if he gets one, I get one last one. And then I promise we'll move. What I wanted to say about the sequence at the end, which I thought was a great comment, I think it was Tony, instead of just spitting out and seeing it, like, I love the idea of you're immersed in the ground, you walk along this wall that is a design of your own, and then suddenly you turn, and then these two walls of yours suddenly frame this killer view of the lake, and you've really drawn and curated this sequence, right? Rather than, I think someone had said earlier, you just land in this look. I like the idea of maybe forcing people to access and occupy your architecture on your way to the finish line.
Yep. Any last comments, Isabel?
I think this is all really great feedback. And I will be making tweaks to this project just for myself and keeping all this in mind. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Totally.
Yeah, thanks.
Moving right along. We're going to the right a good bit to Chen Hao. You ready, Chen Hao?
Yeah, I will start with my sketch and the plan. The second one, yeah, here. So my building is a slope shape, and it's about like 10 meters high and divided into 3 main steps, and it could have the indoor space and the outdoor space, and as the sketch shows, the indoor and outdoor and the 3 steps divide my building into 7 main parts. The first part is the office area, and the second part is the entry and exhibits the photos, the pictures of the birds in the Jefferson Island, and the second part is also have a video room, and then people could go to the next floor inside, and there is also an inside a small elevator there, and inside there is a restroom, and the exhibition area shows the map of Jefferson Island and some history stuff, some historical photos of Jefferson Island, and then they can go to the next area, the outside area, and we show the pictures of the gardens of Jefferson Island, and they can go to the next floor outside, like this is an reading area, and I plan to make some trees or some small plants there, and then they could go inside, and we show the models of the mining. Yeah, so these are 3 showing places. So it could put some big models there, and finally they go outside, and here's the cafe. And when people finish the lunch or dinner, they can go through they can exit the building and walk along by the lakeside. Yeah, the exhibit is just when they finish their cafe, they can go outside by the cafe and then go, yeah. And I will walk along the lakeside. And about my perspectives, I chose 4 perspectives, and this shows the inside and outside. 3 of them are outside because I want to show the people could see what people could see from the first step of the outside spaces, and the one is the shape of the entry, and the last one is the inside area, just shows the first floor, and people could see that. Yeah, and and finally, the the walls for the in the second floor and the third floor, as my axon shows that, which can is a glass which can see the outside spaces, and and there's a big window in the third floor that people could see the lake in the modeling area and the cafe. Yeah, so that is.
Okay. Any other any clarifying questions from the panel?
Ooh, yes.
Go, Andrew.
No, you're the guest.
There's 3 big skylights over that aren't shown in plan, correct?
Yep.
So each skylight is in one of the shoebox type rooms, right? So, sorry. So one skylight will be, that's way too big.
Yeah, we're zoomed way in, but so you're correct.
One's here, right? And one's here. Okay.
Yeah.
And then my question was, Chen Hao, you might have said it at the beginning, but it looks pretty intentional that I go all the way one way and all the way back and all the way one way and all the way back, as opposed to just straight through to the end. What was the intention? What excited you about going there and back and there and back and there and back?
How could I explain it? I just think about this area. These areas could have great connection by the motion lines. So it could be connect better, and just that was I'm thinking about by using this. So
what do you mean by what do you mean by connect better? Because I feel like, just a devil's advocate, I could do that, right, and enter each of the buildings, and I could argue that would connect better.
And that's motion line. The S-shaped lines are the what I want to how people could exhibit see they showing areas to exhibit places by using these motion lines. Yeah.
Okay, so your strategy was, in each space, you wanted someone to enter at one end and leave. Oh my goodness, my pen. You wanted in each space someone to leave at one end and enter in one end, and leave and enter in one end and leave at the other end, just to make sure they experience the entire space.
Yeah.
Word.
I was gonna say, I also was wondering, I write down questions like why the serpentine motion for the architectural promenade. But one of the things that I kind of, as I started looking at it, that I got from it is, unlike Ben's, which was sort of like very on direct access with the lake, and the lake kind of being that, focal point at the end, the turn of the building, and the fact that, one wall is, sort of very thick and opaque, and then the other side is light, it makes the lake, its a relationship with the lake is oblique. And so now this serpentine thing brings you in and out in a way that your focus is now the landscape and the way that topography works, and really kind of brings your mind into actually like focusing on the topography and the change in elevation, kind of even more than just cutting a straight path through it. And so it was sort of, I don't know, kind of getting there myself, just basically from looking at the plan and y'all drawing on it, that it's sort of getting this relationship to the land versus the water, which I think, makes a lot of sense, as well as, with the exhibits that were being mentioned. I do think that instead of listing the exhibits, which room is which, you do this and this and this, give like the overarching reason. The sequence of the exhibits is to do this thing, or for the visitor, or the organization is for this thing, instead of listing them, because I'm not entirely sure I got that overall feeling of like why they're ordered the way they're ordered, just by hearing a list of them. And I'm sure I'm missing something because they were very deliberately placed in your plan in a certain sequence.
I think that's a good note, because also there are specific things, right? Like even from Carrie's brief introduction, there's like geological history, there's the actual disaster itself. Those could all be a room full of stuff, right? An exhibition. Then there's like mining technique and mining. So I think, but even if you are specific, one, there should be that 10,000 foot view of like, this is the overall experience I want you to have. And two, once you do get specific, it's like, why are certain things inside and certain things are outside, right? Like, is outside good for objects to circulate around, or you've got this other, we didn't talk about it much, but you've got this other opportunity here because you have this kind of thickened wall that serves as a, well, it doesn't have to so much because the topography is going down, but it serves a little bit as a retaining wall. And that could be something that you carve into, or could have maps and things like that. And I think I said this last time, Chinhao, but that's where I sort of lose the magic, is if when you look at your perspectives, both indoor and outdoor are using these kind of framed photos or framed maps as the technique to tell us about this place, right? And you'd think that, given the different nature of those two places, that you might design your exhibitions differently as well. There's nothing wrong with with them speaking to each other, right? But I would think you might use them differently.
Actually, that is the photo. Just I used the old one. Just we are talking about this. That is the photo, and the
oh, this is the new one.
This is the new one. But when I'm just want to do this, I found that my trees cannot be shown in the rendering part, so I put the old one there. Yeah.
Okay, so some tech challenges there, but I see you're beginning to address that idea.
Yeah, I was about to point out, I think this is kind of what you were hinting at, Nick, that it's like a different type of exhibit outside. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's like some interesting moments for sure. And I think how you're thinking about materials and the, some sculptural elements at the entry, and maybe like this thing becomes less architecture, and that like there's not one big unifying move besides the big roof. And there are like these little, I think looking back at the plan now, like if these became like little pavilions that were like semi-enclosed and not just like stuck together as one box, I think based on your perspectives, that's how I'm kind of reading this project.
If which became pavilions?
Just the general like floor plan layout. If it was not like, if all the rooms didn't like touch each other and were like could like float or detach themselves from each other under the big roof. You could, I mean, you kind of see it in this aerial, that it's hard to tell like what the building shape is besides the rectangular roof. And that's not the shape of the floor plan, right? So
yeah, and there's, right, I think, there's an opportunity to enhance what Tony was saying too. It's like, if the promenade helps you experience the topo, but there are, again, like we said with Ben's, there are other tools at your disposal to help you do that too. I know you had experimented with potentially having this kind of like earthwork, is the roof earth, right? Or if you keep it as quote unquote architecture, it could be you had looked at the idea of having 3 overlapping roofs, which might help understand that stepping as well.
I was thinking about maybe I agree with everything everybody's saying about how the exterior doesn't really A, look like the interior, and B, doesn't support your narrative of the sequential meander. Tony had a better phrase for it, but I forgot what it was. But I think then I would lean it. Yes. Oh, like a true architectural term, right? Yeah, exactly. Then I was going to challenge you to maybe then maximize that notion of the promenade, right? And these walls, instead of them just being walls, I wonder if they become guiding principles to the project, right? And so now I'm actually passing through these things in my meander, right? And then maybe they're perforated where I can see through. And maybe there's, I can't remember one of the precedents we studied, but it's this basic folded concrete surface in the landscape. And I love the idea is if I'm going through the promenade, imagine, let me change colors. Imagine I hit this window, and I know that's an elevator, but I messed up, right? Where I could see all the way through the building out to the water, but then I continue along the meander, right? And then in that case, if you go back to the axon, Nick, maybe then to make the outside of the building look more like your A, the inside, and B, the promenade, I could see that wall, stick up a bit. And so now you almost sort of read the circulation language inside the building on the outside. And then I don't know if Sergio was hinting to this, but then the light wells maybe could follow the meander, right? And maybe there's, here's a light well, here's a light well. And maybe it's, and usually I say, go lean in way to your concept, and Nick will dial you back when it gets ridiculous, right? But right now, make everything talk about this promenade.
I think that makes sense. And it helps you with structure too. We started pretty late, but talking about structure, and, even what Lyles is drawing there is, it could be an entire wall, or it could even just be superstructure that helps organize the space. And you got to hold up your giant heavy concrete roof as well. So that is time. Any last quick comments?
I just wanted to say that these comments about the next step in the development and maybe breaking this thing apart and looking at the light wells in a different way. This is the moment that when you're looking at the series of sketchy models in a magazine, that the change from this to that is where most people who are interested in design and study design and talk about design will start to really get it. Because I feel like when you do something that drastic, there's this understanding in the sequence of models. Okay, this is where it's getting codified. This is where what the elements mean to the design is starting to become really clear. So I know that you only had so much time this semester, but in my mind, this moment is actually the most exciting moment, because this is the part where you really start to get to dig in and really explore your idea and really show your concept to your audience. So
it's a good point, because we could pick on your bathroom placement, and which I didn't think was ideal, but and you had a prior plan that had stuff kind of tucked away on the side. But anyway, to that point, we're not picking on that stuff right now because we're kind of still in the developmental phase of making a great partie into almost architecture, right? And so it should be the fun part, and hopefully you follow Tony's advice to make it as clear as possible, and then you can work out exactly how the bathrooms work. Great, thank you very much, and we will move on to Kate, who's to the left here. Sorry to jump around. Here's Kate. Hi, Kate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great.
Go ahead and get started.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Jefferson.
Were you saying something, Sergio? I'm sorry.
No, I just said we can hear Kate.
Oh, okay. Floor is yours.
Okay. So hi again. Jefferson Island as a whole is a site that possesses an undeniable level of duality in the various juxtapositions between its largely industrial history and its lush natural present. This proposal for an environmental learning center highlights two of these contrasts through its location on the pier. This particular site accomplishes two goals. It firstly emphasizes the transition between the water of Lake Penure and the land of Jefferson Island. And this site secondly allows for a dual study of the lands and water's differing ecology and topography. While meandering down the natural topography of the hill near the remnants of an old salt mining shaft, the visitor comes across a descending path surrounded by dense vegetation. As the greenery grows taller while the visitor ventures further down the path's gradual slope, benches provide opportunities to rest before entering the center. Near the entrance is a desk at which the viewer can ask questions and find introductory brochures. Upon entering the center, more of the site's context is revealed by James Audubon's Birds of America and by photographs of the ecology of Jefferson Island. The viewer then moves down to a video exhibit that highlights the industrial history of the site and its being affected by the 1980 disaster. After learning this information, the viewer is guided into a transitional space to view physical models that reiterate the message of this video, whether in passing or while participating in a LED discussion. The viewer is then directed outside to the open. They are brought to a dock upon which they can go to a cafe and sit back, relax, and take in the significance of the site that they're visiting. And they can also go to a reading room to supplement their learning. Through the careful placement of exhibition material and the design of the different spatial conditions, this project brings the visitor across topographical levels and introduces them to the full extent of the site's context before allowing them to see the grandeur of the view from the pier's niche. Thank you in advance for your feedback.
Sorry for the lag in panning around. So I hope you guys were following the.
I was just about to ask you to draw that circulation because I had a hard time finding it, but yeah, I could tell you were lagging. There you go.
And so yeah, obviously feel free to ask clarifying questions.
Yeah, first thing, just comment, really cool drawings, Kate.
Thank you so much.
That said, this main floor plan, I think all the textures and the grayscale under the actual floor plan, it's a little tough to read. Or there's like just a lot of lines, like the floor plan should probably pop a little more, meaning that the ground textures and other background information should probably have a little more grayscale or transparency to them.
I think if you just flipped your on ramp, off ramp, these guys get texture, and then the floor plan, indoor and out, remain white. That might help. I know you're also trying to distinguish between inside and outside.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Kate, what was the derivation? I don't quite get the diagram. The slippage and the pointing. What's the conceptual derivation of the slip? It looks like these two things are slipping and they're pointing. Could you say that one more time? I'm sorry. I probably zoned out.
Oh no, I didn't actually talk about that. I could talk about it though. Professor JENISCH, if you can go to the project narrative in the left corner, and also the Part T models. So when I first started to think about this design, I thought about this Part T in terms of open, in terms of closed to open, and also controlled to a free view. And I thought that the way that I could go about representing that is with triangles, because at the smallest point, it's very closed, and then it gradually gets open, allowing for more space, more circulation. And then there's that transitional space that I introduced for this review. I didn't have that for mid-review, where it goes from completely controlled and completely solid walls to half inside, half outside. And then finally you're outside, fully outside. And I utilized triangles for this simply because I was working with a square just to put a model together for part T, and then I cut it in half with a diagonal, and then I said, hey, let's work with this. And so that's where we are.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess that makes sense if it's about framed views. Like, I think be careful when you say I made a cone because it's a view. You can always look to the right. There's nothing that says, that forces your view in that direction, unless you're, and it looks like you are, unless you're pretty rigorous about some walls.
Yes.
Where this X is, that's outside.
Yes, it is.
And that's
so this is outside or inside?
The white that's being circled right now is outside.
I was just saying it's the entryway, not the exit.
Oh, got it. Yeah. I see. What I was saying is it looks like the reception person is outside, like exposed to the elements. And then I didn't know if the slippage was important to you, but you could in order to make this thing look more like your party. I think that, and make a little more logical sense that can you point me an example where you've gone to a museum where you buy the tickets, that person's sitting at a desk out in the courtyard, but maybe now you have this glass box that where it could be the entrance into the building, and it is sort of this sort of yin and yang slippage that your party model is. And then I think it makes it more clear, like you've talked about, like that there's a programmatic mass on the right that's public and or controlled, and a programmatic mass on the left that's uncontrolled, like a wide open platform, I guess. And then this thing in the middle is maybe sort of half and half.
Mm-hmm.
And then all that, I like all that, because is that that's the archive?
Which one? The transitional space?
What's in the controlled space? The semi-controlled space, yeah.
Like the one like in the middle. You mean?
Yes.
Okay. There's like a classroom, an outdoor classroom, where you can see the physical models that were talked about in the video, and it's like a little bit less controlled because you can either sit down in the classroom and actually talk to someone, talk to people who want to learn more, or you could just look at the models and leave the room immediately. And then behind that, once you go outside, you can go to a reading room to add your knowledge if you want to.
Yeah, I think all I was going to say on that note is to maybe curate the programmatic, really think about what's transitional and what's open. Like if I was trying to drop all the program in the categories, I know you just refuted it, but I would, with something called an outdoor classroom, I think I would put in the complete wide open thing. And I think that would help you to program this massive thing that you have that's open, right? And I love the idea that you have a totally unrestrained, a totally restrained, and then a one in the middle. But I want you to get more creative with where things are going, where like an archive seems like, I thought, which one was the archive again?
Do you mean like the reading room? Or where
there's an archive in the disaster archive?
Yes. Yeah, I split it up so that there's a video exhibit for that part, and then there's the reading room in the middle of the transitional space with shelves and books.
Mm-hmm.
And the transitional space below that has the physical models. So I just sort of dispersed it.
Yeah, I was just thinking the disaster archive, an archive sounds like a controlled environment to me. Temperature, light, whatever you name it, right? A video room, when you say video, I think, well, that's probably got to be dark and controlled. So I might have put those in the controlled one. And then my office, I get a little disheartened. If all the offices are in the controlled side, an office might be a good one in the threshold side. Not only would it be central to the program that maybe the office now, can sort of experience, they can address as employees or staff, both sides of the program. They're also would like a degree of light and a degree of dark because and they're kind of half public, half private. It seems like kind of a threshold space. You meet people in the office suite. I come meet the executive director about bringing Tulane there. So I know I said it like in Shen House, but lean into this this idea of breaking it into these thirds. I'd even change the tone, like that the tone, like Sergio was saying, if you do lean into the tone, you know, I think the total free one is maybe white, and then the threshold is light gray, and the controlled one is dark, or something, or different hatches, or something to really, if you're gonna tone plan to make it legible, really lean into this idea of these three categories that are interweaving.
And to piggyback off of what Andrew was saying about programming the outdoor spaces, use these cutouts to your advantage. Right now, like you're not, you know, this is just a walkway. This is kind of just a walkway to get to what seems like a linear bench over here. And then you have these planters that cut up all this open space over here. So yeah, like I think the open space, I don't see it being maximized to be as flexible as the kind of program or the way you're talking about the program.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was also thinking about formalizing that transition space is really critical at this point. And also little moves like, I guess I'm going to look at the one right next to it. But, you know, instead of these being cutouts, oh, sorry, Nick, the one, yeah, the kind of overhead roof plan where my cursor is, instead of those being cutouts, maybe, you know, it's a material change in the roof that does something else so that the transition space slice starts to really read as well as, like, you know, as a slippage instead of something puncturing the roof, which really doesn't go with the dynamism of your, you know, your part T, which is it's supposed to feel dynamic even though it's static because of your intent there. And then I did have a question or comment depending on if you put them in last minute. I think you probably thought about them because given your presentation, like the drawing, it's so well laid out and all of the images in it are really well developed. But I was wondering, and if you said this, I'm sorry, I missed it, what the point of having such rigorously planted trees when you're in such a natural environment. And I'm not saying that it's like, it's bad. I'm just really curious because you're, you know, kind of in like this wild space where you're messing with the landscape as, you know, light footprint, not messing with the landscape. And then you're like, you know, have a very rigorous, very specific tree planting along these pieces. And I'm just curious about how those two things work together. And if you're giving yourself a barrier that you don't want there.
Are you asking about like in the model or in the section?
I was actually asking about it in the, where my cursor is on that plan, which is where I can see it the best. And also in the floor plan, I can see that there's little planters as well. And I just realized I made a little line. I didn't mean to, but in the two drawings right there, you can really see the little trees, and you can see the little tree planters in the floor plan next to it on the left.
Yeah, I didn't know if you were referring to like the trees outside the program or actually the ones that I put in there.
Yeah.
So to add to just controlling the view and really emphasizing the path and where one is meant to continue, I added the trees just to control the view and also just add to the program of the spaces to make it clear that, you know, okay, I'm not supposed to walk here, or I can walk here between the trees, or that was the goal.
I think it's a pretty bold move just to make that big long screen. You know, if we're looking at the section, you know, this guy here, like I think we're pretty well controlled, right? So maybe it doesn't need that. And maybe, you know, I think early on, I thought it needed it for your outdoor space, but maybe to Sergio's point, the outdoor platform can be even freer. And we do have to move on, but I appreciate the sections as well, trying to help us understand how those spaces would feel. Any last comments?
Yeah, I think my last ones would be, I'm still looking for the the set, and I'm trying not to sound like a broken record, but if I was going to draw just one section, I think I would have drawn it through the three different spaces that you talk about, the fully enclosed, the fully open, and the threshold one, because I'm dying to see how they relate. Like, is the middle one nested between the two, or is one tall, medium, and short? And is the threshold one sort of floating off the ground? Like, kind of leads me to the section you did draw. Oops, I was trying to zoom in, where I think it looks like at the end, it's like a break room, and the space before is a video room. And we talked a little bit about this, I thought, as a group, the idea that a gallery and a break room and a conference room or a video room all have the same spatial hierarchy. Immediately off the bat, that shows you an opportunity to refine your sections. And I would challenge you even, I bet you could stack these last two, and then you would have more of a proper, maybe spatial hierarchy that a break room, like spatial quality, a break room probably only needs to have that kind of, you know what I mean by spatial quality? A break room doesn't need like a 22-foot ceiling. It might start to feel like an elevator. So to stack and really play with these spaces in section. And if you don't want to stack things, maybe it's just your opportunity to sort of play with the ceiling height, right? And then that might start to help you figure out how to represent that threshold in those conditions.
And I think in your perspective, the other, you can see that opportunity here, right? Whether this thing actually, well, now I don't have enough here. Whether this thing sits lower or, Tony was saying it could actually come up. Maybe this piece of roof does something different when it's the transition. So it's good to do that perspective and then reconsider, right? And go back and forth between the drawings.
And then I want the threshold perspective. This is the totally enclosed one and the totally open one. I'm dying to see how these two mediate, right?
Yeah, that was next on my list, and then it got to about 10 o'clock today, and I was like, you know what? I think it's time to call it. So,
thank you guys.
Thanks, Kate.
We'll go
Thank you so
to
much.
Aaron.
Hi. So I just want to preface this by saying that I missed some time with the flu last week, so I don't have a physical model, unfortunately. But I guess I'll start with my site plan. You would approach my building from this side along the path, which also means that as you're exiting the building, you get this view of the building framed. As for the actual building, the entrance has a sort of overhang, which creates a bit of an entry plaza right here. And as you enter, the first thing that the museum goer would experience would be the movie room, the video room, I should say. And then as they, after they finish watching whatever the film playing is, they would move through this hallway where you have some general information, some artifacts. You have two boards right here at either side that would have a map, just an information board. And then as you cross over here, this corner, you enter into a larger area and get a bit of a sense of grandeur. And this space is super open. The salt mining cart right here would be suspended from the ceiling to, again, create more openness. You can go up the stairs then after that. And then you have, if you go to my second plan floor, you have just some more space up here. You have this sort of view of the whole building. That was a very sloppy arrow, but you have this view of the whole building, and then you have this reading room, which is super private, super quiet. It's pretty much the farthest point from the action, so you get a better experience in there. And then as for the cafe, you have a large outdoor space on the deck over here. That's where the majority of the seating is. That's where the experience would mainly be, but you also have some indoor seating up here.
Anything else you want to say about your section? What about or perspectives about the big open space you're providing?
Okay, so I guess in my section, we'll start over here. You have this, a big part of my program would be a piece of the drill, which protrudes into the ground and is surrounded by glass. And then if you go over to my perspectives, this is just the outdoor perspective of the entry plaza. Again, these are two very unpolished perspectives, which I apologize for. I just didn't have time to make them as beautiful as I'd like for them to be. But the interior perspective, you can see the deck and the cafe area. And then this is taken from the second floor over the edge, or on the edge, I should say. And yeah, you could just see more of the open space around here. The experience isn't quite as controlled as some of the other drawings, but that gives, I think that gives a lot of freedom to the museum goer.
Okay.
Just a clarification, you just dove right into the building. What was the driver? And it could be anything. What's the conceptual driver again? Like, what made you decide to do like a chamfered box in that location?
It's the tippy top of the hill too, in case y'all didn't notice. It's the hilltop location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it did a great job of allowing for the view of the water while still maintaining this sort of seclusion that you would feel in the forest. So I really like the hilltop site. As for the shape, again, just having this sort of cut edge just allows for a view of the water and I guess part of the forest, but there would be a clearing of the trees here. And it also just, it created a lot of opportunity to have an open floor plan where something like a building in a rectangular shape, you can't really put as much open space because you would have like more hallways, if that makes sense. So I think having the box just allowed for open space while still allowing for the view and the seclusion of the forest.
You ever seen the Barcelona Pavilion?
I've not.
Yes, you have. You saw it in Scott Bernard's intro to architecture class. Beautiful rectangular building with no hallways or implied hallways. I was just challenging you that a rectangle doesn't require you to have hallways or a central space.
Well, you've done something here that I don't think we've seen yet, which is your foundation is sitting on the landscape, and as Nick clarified, at the top of the hill. It's not above and it's not nestled into it, and I think that has a really strong implication. But I do think that there is a little chance for that to reflect, the either the dynamism or the solidity you want of your building. And that could probably be explored a little bit more and a little bit more developed, or at least, have a very strong reason for why you've chosen like a slab on grade, just kind of like sitting right there on top of the hill.
Yeah, I know Tony didn't say perverse, but I'm going to agree with her. Like, there's not a single window on the ground floor except for the one that faces the other way, faces the water. It almost naturally wants to be embedded in the ground, right? Maybe in the hillside, because when you look at the ground floor plan, I almost thought you had just forgotten to tone in where it's below grade, right? That is 100% wall all there, with a favored view, sort of that way, and so that's where I was just challenging you that maybe it's perverse that you've gone on this hilltop with this opportunity for 360-degree views, and yet you only favor one side. That's a contradiction that can set up for an interesting project, but you have to, sort of investigate it and pursue it. You know what I'm saying?
I think there's just a quick thing on that is like, there are other ways to keep the purity of that idea. I think you've stuck with this from the beginning, and I understand why, but you can still have this chamfer cut be, floor to ceiling glass. And you talked about, being embedded in the, you're getting rid of some trees in this view path, right? So that becomes open. So that's what that's about. You could still have either clear story, or I would argue even eye level windows, like here, here. I know this is a theater, so you probably wouldn't, but could be clear story there and like eye level here, because all you're looking out at is trees, right? So it doesn't, and they could be punched openings as opposed to floor to ceiling glass. So even that dichotomy still favors this huge move of chamfering the corner and giving that all of the glass.
Yeah, and I thought you were pretty close to and where I thought the project was going to go was, since it's on the hilltop, you have, let's see if I can draw it, put the plans side by side. Perfect, right? That on the ground floor, why does it keep filling? Oh, I see what I did. Right, on the ground floor, you sort of have, a box or a chamfer. Actually, you know what? I'll do the chamfer because I know that's your, where you want to be. Right. So you kind of have a chamfered edge of a box here. And then on the second floor, I thought you were going to try and do the same thing. Right. And that makes complete sense on the hilltop. Right. That maybe you just invert this plan where you've cut away something to reveal a courtyard looking that way. Then you have this other thing perched on top with that outdoor classroom that sort of faces that way. And it maybe starts to be sort of this box down that looks one way, and then this box on the top that looks the other way, whoops, it's on a hilltop, right? That maybe, well, I've messed that up completely. But maybe this idea of these two boxes on the hilltop start to talk about how you could favor either direction while you're on that hilltop.
And you still have opportunities to be amongst the trees, kind of like in and around here, and then view this way and view that way.
Nick, would you mind showing that section, the building section? Because I was also thinking, even if you kind of come to the determination that this like one solid sculptural form is the way that you wanted to go with the building design, I think you could also just look at, and more detailed, obviously, place than we'd be getting to at this point in the semester, but how it meets the ground. And so I'm really bad at finding a thicker thing, but like even just like the tiniest little indentation, the way that the building meets the ground is so important. And so I think that that's really a place where total design and your kind of understanding of not only building construction, but like really deft moves that make a massive difference for something so massive in itself and can really change whether or not it feels light or dynamic or static or solid. That's kind of like the places you get to do that. So even if your idea is like one very strong geometric volume, there's ways that you can continue to underline that and actually kind of push it towards having the right feeling, especially because right now we're looking at how the experience of the building in the landscape. So how it meets the landscape is really critical and should be a good next point. And that being said, since I already asked for the section to be up, I do appreciate the fact that you are already thinking about the building itself in double height and single height spaces. So, even though it's very like solid, like your understanding of how these spaces differ internally is very clear. And I think that that's a really big asset to the section showing that.
Just one thing about what Tony's saying is like in your render, you are showing this. Let's see, where are we? You're showing, well, anyway, this is the wrong section to show it, but like, is the path?
Delete that, Nick? Delete my.
No, that's fine.
Oh.
Is the path connected and of the building, or is this just actually like of nature and gravel? And there's a reveal here between the building, and so I think it's just a small detail, but it's something that can help inform this, because this is actually a lovely, idea of being in a wooded setting. Whereas, the other side of the building is open because it's about the view, but this is the wooded side, quote unquote. And so I think you'd want to think harder about how this path gets designed and how it interacts with the building along this. It's kind of like just an uneasy tension at the moment, right? But I think they could be designed together. And it's probably just a, afterthought of the path running through there, but I think it's an opportunity and it's your first impression, right? Sorry, Sergio.
Oh, yeah, no, I was gonna just add that the rendering, the interior rendering kind of sells me on, I think, what was maybe an initial driver, was having these two objects really be the showcase. And I think if you go to the floor plan, having that main room just be those two objects and taking all the utility stuff, even though you can make like a really nice museum staircase, separating this staircase from this space and just letting those two things be in there by themselves would be to your benefit. So really use the advantage of this L, organizational L that you've created. Like right now, this space I think is pretty dead. So can the stair move there, elevator move there? And then this is like the wow, like holy space of the project, drawn really badly by me.
I'm going to say something nitpicky, which is on the second floor plan, often if you have a situation like this, it's not super important to have light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So you would rather give that unused space over to an office, or even have this whole thing be the office and you enter here, right? That's just a little nitpicky thing. I know you can also stand here and look out over the space, but I'm not sure that that's, you can also do that over here, right? So you could always flip the storage and mechanical with the office space and kind of still let the office overlook the kind of special space. I had one other nitpicky thing, but I'm forgetting. On the second floor, of course, you would still see this patio, right? So you can draw it in less detail, or you can use different conventions. You can make it lighter, but you would certainly see it, and your second floor certainly interacts with it.
And just for the purposes of architectural practice in general, and I'm sure you're not the only one, but this makes me think of it. When you are selling this building to your client, you have to make sure it is imperative that you design the furniture that's going on that cafe, and they have to understand the importance of you getting that scope in your design scope. And I think the way that you do that is, just as an example, is not for school's purposes, but you would have done it already, and you would have shown it in your rendering, and it would have been at the level of this, the powerful image of the rendering, to the point that they could not accept any other furniture than the one you showed, because it fits so seamlessly with your concept in the building and it works perfectly. So I think, just like in general, architects try to take as much scope as they absolutely can in any project for their ability to design, so that they have the kind of control over the whole. But in this instance, I think it's not only critical, but it would just be absolutely fantastic. So definitely push for that when you get this job.
And just to explain that, or add to that, having built-in stuff, right? We all put CAD blocks in at the last minute sometimes, but having more built-in stuff, and you're starting to do that here, right? With a piece of the seating that has to be a certain way or what have you. But anyway, that's just a first step on the road to what Tony's saying. We are at time.
My super last one, and then we'll go. The more we talk about this center space, the more I wonder if we're entering it appropriately, like right along the edge of and looking out, and then coming back and looking at those two exhibit pieces against the bathrooms. When maybe if it's a hilltop and it doesn't matter where I come in, is there any way I could sort of either come in through this way, see all these exhibits, maybe receptions down here, and then enter under that stair, and then blam, right? I'm hit with this big glass wall that is framed by this drill bit and this crane and this mining cage against this beautiful sunset sky, right? Rather than kind of entering at the tail end on the tangent. Someone made this comment in someone's review earlier, but anyway, this idea that my initial instinct was to maybe cut. I think Sergio had mentioned there's some dead space in here. Maybe you still can come in on this side, experience this exhibit, and then come in. But if it's a hilltop, I wonder if we could just come a little further around the hilltop, enter, and then enter right at that knuckle and see where you're perpendicular to that chamfered glass, which seems important to you. That's
for you and for Kate, making that threshold experience special is important, I think. Thank you, Aaron. We have one more, and then we will take a break. We're gonna look at SIGs.
sick.
Just to the right.
Thank you.
Oh, I panned too far away. Okay, I'm back.
All right. So for this project, I felt that the hillside site held kind of the past, present, and future of Jefferson Island. This is a site where viewers can experience both the remains of the mine as well as the current nurseries and gardens, and view the trajectory that Mike Richard is working to take the site in the future. And so this project allows viewers to enter thresholds. There are 3 separate main rooms which make up the main components of the building. And in each of these rooms, they can experience first the mine, and then the nursery, and then they can look out and experiencing the site in its present state. Viewers descend through a carved out ravine from a main path, and upon entering, they are placed in a recreation similar to the mine. This is constructed using the room and pillar fashion, which was used for the Jefferson salt mine. And my concrete walls have been plastered to replicate the actual salt walls that the miners would experience every day in the mine. So viewers can enter embedded rooms on the side. You can see those in the plan, and then the second floor plan shows which rooms are embedded and which are not. And these rooms hold programming for the mine, such as the video room and the reading room, where viewers can go learn about the disaster or read James Audubon's books on birds of America. And then circulation continues up to the second floor. And this portion is populated with more actual dedicated recreation of the mine, with many objects from the mine and a little recreation of the mine scene. From this second platform, viewers then walk on the same level into through this second threshold into the second portion of the building, which mimics the nursery and the gardens. Here, a facade of alternating wood and glass planks mimics the surrounding forest, and which viewers have ascended to the level of, as well as they rise from embedded in the ground to this building, which starts located on the land of the contour. As viewers wander the exhibits, they can learn about the history of the mine, or the history of the nursery and the Rip Van Winkle gardens, and where Mike Richard plans to take them, and really get an in-close look at these unique species of plants and such that they're growing and cultivating there. Once viewers have walked through this space, they're led to a third threshold. This is much more open than the previous 2, to really open viewers up to the site as a whole. Punching through this viewing platform is actually a tree which will be added to the site and planted. And this allows for so-called tree grabbers, if people really want to experience the foliage, or they can walk past this and they're given a view of the wreckage of the mine and the pier as it runs out through the lake. From this point, viewers can either continue down a path which takes them exploring throughout the rest of the site, or they can continue back up the ravine and back towards the main path and parking. And this building gives viewers a glimpse of the island's past, present, and future as they're allowed to experience each one.
All right, take a minute to peruse. Did you say where we're coming from when we find ourselves coming down the ravine here?
Yeah, if you want to move over to that, my first site plan, you can see, so that the large pochade area road to the left is a gravel path that is pre-existing, and this path runs, it'll take viewers either to the nursery or the main road, which it works as a place of travel between the remains of the mine and then current present day society. And then this is a branch off of that where viewers can descend into the building.
Sig, on your second floor plan, what's in the programmatic space of the second box? Is that one you've created, or?
Can you circle it for me real quick?
Yeah, it's the yellow. I'm the yellow circle. I'm the little yellow. I'll go bigger. What's in this space?
This is the nursery and the gardens and the future where the island is currently heading.
So that's a program you've added to the program, to the project, right? Man, I think it seems like a pretty clean, organized program. I think this might be small and it might be large. I can't tell. But you said it was built in the same style or the same construction narrative as the mines. But I would argue the mines, they are like sort of post and beam, or what do you call it? Pillar and
room and pillar.
Say it again.
Room and pillar.
Room and pillar, right? It feels like maybe I'll ask you to tell me what's room and pillar about it rather than simply structural columns. Like one could argue room and pillar is actually a subtractive process, or maybe it deals in heavy poche if it's not necessarily subtractive, because no one really makes an actual subtractive building unless you are like carving straight like or out of a mountainside or something. Maybe clarify that statement.
So I'd say I agree with you. I also tried to give this a carving out approach. If you want to go over to my perspectives, I think that will give a better idea of this space.
Mm-hmm.
You got to keep going.
Yeah, there we go. So
no, I'm saying you have to. Oh, I thought you were stop talking. Go ahead.
Okay. So for this, I wanted it to be mainly the building is one whole material, just as the mines, and it has the rooms are actually the pillars protrude into the rooms and they section off. I used that grid to space all of the buildings and such. And I really wanted to get the appearance that when one walks in, if you'll want to scroll over to actually my model photos, I have that entrance photo right there. And then as one walks in, they're greeted by these pillars, which are rising up and part of this whole structure, which is one material.
Sig, why did you stagger the two buildings in that way? Not only like in elevation, but like in plan?
Yeah, so originally I had been working with the central promenade,
Mm-hmm.
and that caused a lot of structural issues, as well as it made those thresholds much harder to read. So I felt that offsetting it really helped to show that large threshold between the mine portion and the gardens portion. And if you want to scroll back to my perspectives, you can see how the concrete portion actually protrudes into, that's that far left perspective. That wall continues as part of the raised portion to better raise that idea that it's two separate spaces, but you can experience them together.
Yeah, piggybacking on, Sergio, go ahead. I thought you were done.
No. So the other building is, what material is that shown? It kind of looks like brick, or on the right, left and right. Yeah.
The first building for the mine or for the nursery?
The next phase.
For the viewing platform also continues the wood as it places you on the top of the canopy, and it relates to those wooden piers. So the poles here are much, much thinner to, again, break down that threshold and really open the space up to the surrounding site and mimic those poles from the pier as well to bring it back.
All right.
I love how your section looks like an overlap, and I was wondering if that's where Sergio was headed. Like, I kind of want your section to be your plan also. It might more clearly amplify, like, let's all squint and pretend this is the plan. I love even the poche is thicker, right? Like this maybe starts to feel how this is so thick and dark that I am entering into a poche, right? And then this is the past. And then I sequence through I go up that stair and I sequence through the present. And then I end up in the future and in this framed area that kind of spits me out, right? And it would just be a simple, now if we go back to the real plan, simple, right? Is to rework your entire plan, right? This idea
We
of,
all know that you love that.
I'll take it because it's cyclical, right? If you just shift that over, suddenly maybe you have that same rich overlap of past, present, and future.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah, right now I want a little more connection, like you were saying, Andrew, and in the plan and volumetrically, like you kind of read in this section.
I was so I just wanted to say that, oh sorry, unless Sergio was still talking.
No, that's it. Yeah.
Just making sure, sorry. So you have this structure that sort of mimics the salt mines, including like the texture that you have on the walls. And then you have this element that is in the wooded structure, that the vertical elements mimic the trees that are surrounding it. And then all the way at the very end, you have the so you have these parts of the building and they're all sort of referencing and blending into and tying into what is physically there in the environment and the landscape. And at the very end of that, you have the building basically capturing a tree, which I think is an the implication there is incredibly heavy, especially considering you can see you can view the mine wreckage from that area. And yeah, I mean, that's like some incredibly, that is some resonant meta movement right there. I mean, it really, I was thinking about the way that you were doing it as you start off in the past, you go through the future, which is the nursery, and then you end up at the present where you're looking at mine wreckage and you're looking at, the human kind of like the human disasters on natural environment. And like, you're just like, oh, crap, we need to do something. And I don't know why, but I actually really liked that about it. I thought it was, it was like a little heavy, but I think when it comes to something like this, I'm assuming that there's always an environmental and nonprofit component to what this place is going to be with the educational portion. And so I think it's actually really important to be very clear where we are specifically in this moment with like, our impact on these places that we're trying to, create archives of, celebrated materials for. So I don't know. I like that. I was just like, oh, dang,
Thank you.
That's the timer noise, but take a last comment or two and then we'll take a break.
Just one last thing to consider. I don't know if it's worth anything, Sig, but maybe this has a little more sculpture to it and really like accentuates the heaviness to it. But I'm sorry,
where are we
in a section like for the entry, so that you really feel like you're going into like a sunken place. But at the same time, I also like the simplicity of like this like concrete box that's like buried into the landscape. So I think the simplicity of this structure that adjoins this a little more intricate, detailed future phase, I think that also works well. So just some things to consider.
I think my last comment would come from like a regularity. I would like to see a little more in the in the sections. Like if the found a gold star for putting foundation like structure in it, it might be a little too literal if you're aiming for like tree trunk and canopy. So I would almost be a little more interested in like, can ooh, that was a horrible line. Can the fins of the future building sort of nod, play on the same language as the post in the existing one, right? Well, now I'll just keep doing that line because we're running out of time, right? So now, the fins in the open one can still have, I won't draw my line. I'm going back to these, right? So do you see how I'm just making the column identical to the fin in the other one? And I don't know if this is supposed to be trunk and canopy, but I think even the pier could line up with the fin in the sections of well, just to have, even though they're two separate buildings, I love the idea that when I look at them together, they have a language. Like even this mechanical, I don't know if this mechanical thing tucks between the two. That one actually looks like it kind of does, right? And I could even see it sort of slipping between them.
And if you do the Lyle's overlap project, that would be even more relevant a strategy.
You got time until Friday.
So we have, let's see how far behind we are. Let's take a 13-minute break and we'll be back at what time is it? 3:20, 3:35. How's that?
That's generous.
Are you going to say 3 minutes?
No.
I know.
Lyle's computer pen needs a break. It wasn't working. Thank you, guys.
All right.
All right, everybody. Rihanna, are you back?
Yes.
All right. We're right on the dot. So even as people filter back in, let's get started so we can stay on time. Floor is yours.
Okay. So I'll start by saying that the project focuses on the pier portion of the Jefferson Island site. And I thought that this would really create an opportunity to take advantage of one of many ways, like in the site, to unite land and Lake Panure, and like in the experience of visitors, like circulation through the building. And then the actual concept itself originated from a party of 3 rectangular cube-like spaces that were all the same size originally, but ended up varying a little bit as it got into like program and orientation. And the orientation of them all comes from carefully selected views of the site. So when visiting the building, visitors gain the experience of descending until they leave on the exterior portion and climb steps on their way out. Until that last moment, it's all like descending through spaces. So kind of giving the experience of like descending down a mine shaft, and it's like kind of, that's, like I said, emulated by the consistent decrease in elevation as they work towards the cafe, which then kind of concludes the like descending experience at sea level. And then so beginning at the highest point of the building, which takes advantage of a view offered from a high point of the site, roughly like 20 feet up from where the cafe is. Visitors are greeted with the first of 2 more open and airy views made possible by the really large windows. And then they proceed to descend by elevator into like a theater area for viewing, and then a reading room space. And this space is lit only by artificial light intentionally. And then they proceed through like a compression space, which you can see in plan, that has a much shorter, it's compressed in all like senses, and it's a much shorter ceiling and completely embedded into the topography, which allows them to experience a more like confined setting, darker naturally. And this is where some exhibitionary material and the salt wall is visible. And then as visitors exit this compressed space, they enter as they're moving or descending in topography or elevation as well. So they're moving into a more open 2-story like atrium-like space, which is like lit naturally and artificially, but much more naturally compared to the compression space that they have just come from. And then this exhibition area is then met with part of the glass enclosure of the cafe, which protrudes into it as the final 2 rectangles are intertwined. And then they descend one last time into the cafe, where they enjoy, just like in the first building, the largest, most airy and open views. And then they can either circulate their way back through the building the way that they came, or exit via the stairs coming through the outside, and then walk along the building and back up the elevation and return. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Can you tell us about the perspectives?
So the one on the left is an interior perspective, and the one on the right is the exterior perspective. The interior perspective is the doorway that connects the compressed area, which you can kind of see a little bit of on the right, the bottom right-hand side. You can kind of see a little bit of the salt wall, which lines one of the walls of the compression like special moment that I talked about before. But so that's the doorway that is connecting the dark, low ceiling compressed area to the larger open atrium space, which is has the mining cage in the center. And then on the right is an exterior perspective of the lowermost staircase coming out of the cafe for like the exit in which they walk alongside of the building. So it wraps around and you can kind of see the continuation of the stairs.
Rihanna, will you tell me one more time why you think your site is pier versus hillside? That was a lead into what I'm going to ask you next.
I think it's pier just because when I originally had marked, which is like you can see in one of the more like diagrammatic plans on like the most left side, originally marked the area. I knew that it was an overlap between like hillside and pier, but I thought that because the third view was so focused on like the old railroad and transportation, that was where the kind of ruins that marked like those little like objects protruding from the water and the pier like ruin area, that I thought because of that like last view that it was more pier than hillside.
Because it looks at pier, but the whole building exists, one would argue, on the hillside. I'm just curious, like, I don't think it changes anything if you just said my project is hillside, because when you look at the section, like the whole thing is about nestling in this hillside. And I think it looks like, you have a 2-story space and then the ground floor is completely nestled. I think if this is right. And then like, this is actually earth, right? And then you come through like an underground tunnel, and then suddenly you're afforded this wild, bright sort of view.
Right. Yeah. I suppose the building itself more than interacts with the hillside than the pier, but the pier, or I guess the building consistently like looks out along the water, like with views of the pier. So that's kind of where I got that idea from. But yeah, I guess the building itself, because it's embedded in topography, is the hillside.
Yeah, no, I'd argue so far, I think every project we've seen looks out at the water. So I think it's just thinking about, I know it's semantics and everybody's wondering why I'm wasting our time talking about this, but it's just this idea that I think it might even be a stronger project if you talk about that it's a hillside project, because I literally go in the hillside and come back out. Mm-hmm. Actually, the verb, if you remember the introduction to the project, Professor Norman assigned a verb or a preposition or whatever you call that form of speech to each site manifestation, and yours fits beautifully into the hillside. So I wonder if it doesn't change a lot in your portfolio. I would just say it's a hillside project.
Brianna, what are the columns in the compressed spaces, or what's the intention of adding sort of more objects or obstacles in there?
Yeah, so it's kind of just like it's a compressed space to begin with, and then just like 1-foot columns with like exhibitionary like material and objects are like designed to like create kind of like a obstructed and like weaving, like it's not just like like walking straight through kind of, it's more of like a like an obstacle, and like it's,
but are they columns or podia?
Podiums. Yeah, podiums.
Okay. And then besides, it being sort of a dark space, right? Because there's no windows and it's buried. How do you know you're underground as a visitor?
I suppose because when you enter from the first, the main entrance, like as you take an elevator down, and because of the way that you approach the building, you're seeing only the top half of you're only seeing the lobby space and above ground. So when you're descending in the elevator, then it kind of like, you might not know exactly like where in the earth you are, but you kind of like get the feel of going underground, and it's the way that it is darker and everything, I think kind of like all reinforces that. And then that you're not changing elevation in the building itself, like when you're walking from like the theater area to the more compressed space. So it's just like the idea of not really having moved since you got out of an elevator that clearly was going down, I guess you kind of know that you're underground.
Nick, do you mind panning over to this section again?
Yep.
So right where Andrew drew the red mound, if you kind of maybe consider having some skylight opening that would like flood one of the walls there, I think if you make that like a very like small sliver, it would be very like dramatic, and I think it would accentuate this feeling of being like buried, the way the light has to travel through a certain thickness of ground. And so that would also solve some like, daylighting issues that, you might want to have some daylight in there, not just have it be artificial light. But some like cues where you can maybe like even stick your head under the skylight and look up and see sort of the thickness of what you're under.
Yeah, and I feel like my thought kind of ties in with that like showing, not telling aspect that I think Serge's point makes, which is if you have the if you could, would you just mind putting on the plans, Nick?
Yep.
The one that everyone drew on already, is what I was thinking of when you're talking about, compressed space, instead of it just being something really static with just a regular doorway in between it and the other spaces, really use those thresholds to highlight what the experience is for the users. So kind of in the same way that an elevator shaft is very, there's a very strong compression and a vertical movement, maybe, the space is its own form, and just by simply jutting a smaller ceiling height, thicker volume into this space, when the person walks through that threshold, they feel the compression, and vice versa on the way out. So there's more than just that way to do it, but it would be a way to actually use those two thresholds to show to show and to make it feel like what you're trying to accomplish, as opposed to just walking through the door. That's just, and more having them to tell us, that's what's going on here. And also,
you totally stole my thunder, but so I'm gonna bore y'all.
Them all the time.
I'm gonna bore you and say the same thing again. I think one of my favorite parts of your project, Brianna, and I just erased it. I like it so much. Nick, the top perspective. There's something, I did it again. I'm trying to lock it and I keep erasing it. I love this moment right here where it looks like these three buildings overlap. It's really beautiful. And I'm glad Sig called me out that I changed plans up until the last minute so my students, or I encourage them to, because the more often than not, I find that students try and start with plan and they feel like plans are precious. And they feel like they start with plan and then they battle and muscle this. And a plan, remember, you never see a building in plan, and they're horrible conductors of space, unlike a section, which is a brilliant conductor of space. So, and if you make a better section, but it's incongruent with the plan, by all means, change the plan to defer to the one that actually experiences space as you actually experience it. So, for example, when you see these three overlaps, I'm like, oh, yeah. So my next comment was Tony's comment that I would start to overlap your spaces just as your perspective inspired me to create overlapping and interlocking and interweaving spaces. And it makes for a stronger building, right? So in that great how architecture is cyclical, you were informed yourself from your perspective and went back and changed the plan, as opposed to starting the plan first and then just being stuck with it.
And you have it in this one moment here, right? But you don't do it anywhere else, right? So it's just trying to keep that system or that idea consistent throughout.
Exactly. And then in the section, like maybe, I don't know if the compressed hall can come out here, and then I would try and make some sort of double height space, right? So maybe I'm up on this balcony, and heck, maybe even somebody can stand here. And now you've got this great sort of, I don't know what happened to that guy's head. Something shot off it, right? But look at now the sectional quality. Rather than just these two pancakes, maybe just by cutting an opening in there, maybe that hoist cage can hang in the back half of this space. And now I'm in the video room in the front, but I'm standing on top of this thing. And I don't know if something happens here, right? Or maybe this whole thing somehow registers. Who knows? It just, and that one detail in your perspective really inspires me about ways you could then respond in both the plan and the section.
Thank you, guys.
And I just wanted to say, if you're going to say that they're cited to, specific, carefully selected views of the site, it would be good to show the views that you picked.
Yeah, and just in general, I think it's, this conversation would benefit from a greater level of development, including understanding context in your perspectives and even some poche in the plan, right? So we understand where you're treating window conditions versus pochette wall, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's where those things come in handy, right? Is your intention gets read immediately instead of having to explain it to Tony's point.
Agreed.
Thank you. We're going to move to Chris. There's two projects to the left. If you're panning, Chris, you there?
Yeah, hi. So my project is placed on the pier site because I was intrigued by that thin piece of land that extrudes out into the cove. And I placed 2 of the 3 spaces of the project on either end of that extrusion. And they're placed in relation to the program of that space. So the one that's embedded in the land is the industrial space. And it has these tall chambers that kind of replicate the pillars of the Roman pillar mines below, except they're carved out to actually allow occupancy within them. And they host some of the objects, display objects like the salt dome model and the mining cage. Then on the other end of that pier is the ecology exhibition space, and that one is a more open space. It has window wrapped wall or completely windowed walls, so that way visitors can look out on the site as they learn about the ecology within that space. The third building in the middle is what I call the guest services space, so that hosts the lobby, reading rooms, and the video space, so people can watch the film about the history of the site. And on top of the industrial site, or the industrial exhibition space, is the cafe, so visitors can look out onto the rest of the project and over the lake before they're ready to leave. And you can kind of see the relationship between the cafe and how it sits on top of the industrial space and the axon a little bit. And if we go down to the perspectives, you can see 3 different experiences of the building. The first perspective shows sort of as you approach the building from the land, in as if you're headed towards the pier that leads into the guest services building. That second perspective shows the inside of the industrial space, and you can see the model for the salt dome. And then the third perspective is looking from inside the ecological building out to the other 2 buildings on the site.
All right. Can you just tell us quickly, are we cutting through the lobby in your section perspective?
Yeah, that is a section cut through the lobby, and in the background is the industrial building and the cafe on top.
Sure. Okay.
Do you mind clarifying one more time what determined your siting, your building siting?
Yeah, sure. So I was intrigued by that bit of land that kind of extrudes out into the lake. So my building sits parallel to that.
I don't mean to sound perverse, but oh, go ahead, Tony. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, but no, you go since you.
It reminds me of that vicious rumor about falling water, where they hired Frank Lloyd Wright and they showed him. They went out to Racine, not Racine. Isn't that where it is? I can't remember now. Where they go out and the family shows this plot of land that they love, and they're like, we really love this little outcropping right at the stream's edge. And so Frank Lloyd Wright dynamites it and puts the building right at this place that they said was so important to them. And I almost kind of want you to do that. Like, you know, I know you're saying, you know, I'm intrigued by this pier, so everything looks at it. But I wonder if it would, I love the idea of embedding one into the ground, having one straddle both. And then all I was doing was, hold on, that one. All I was going to challenge you to do is maybe somehow just slide that thing up here. I love how, like, you've got one that's totally in the ground and it's thick and poche, or it's stereotomic, one totally in the water and it's tectonic. And then you have a hybrid one that's kind of in the water also. And I wonder if you just slid this building a few feet forward, now one's still embedded in the ground. One is actually maybe utilizing and immersed in these piers. And then the middle one could somehow perhaps be a hybrid of both. And now this beautiful perspective, I love it, the bottom right one, actually has, you know, these pier system, like the whole building is sort of nestled around this pier system. And it really, and maybe somehow some notion of the land, like it just seems a little timid, and I'd love to sort of celebrate it and immerse yourself right into it. But feel free to refute and say you'd rather did you ever consider being on it versus looking at it?
I considered it a little bit, but I just didn't. I felt it was disruptive, and I guess in general, I'm just not a disruptive person, so I didn't take that.
I'm wildly disruptive. Oops. See, and I even erased your plan to prove it.
Chris, what determined the distances you pull the buildings apart?
Yeah, so the distances are about the same distance as the buildings themselves.
Okay, I wanted, that's what I figured. I just wanted to know there was a logic. And then what happens at the second floor, sort of outdoor area, once you land at the top of the stairs? So the opposing to the cafe seating area? Where
so you enter, like that's the top of the stairs, and you enter into the building. And
before that.
Yeah, like what's being circled? Sorry, I should do more of that, Nick. It seems like you're giving equal weight to that outdoor area. Then why not give it all to the cafe area and just have that be like a thinner balcony that's mainly just circulation right now, or extend the enclosed space out to the edge of the stair?
Chris, we know the answer. Say it. Symmetry. That's why you did it, right?
Yeah, she likes symmetry, but this is when you start off with symmetry and you're like, oh, my program requires me to break these rules, and it actually works out a lot better if things aren't symmetrical.
Yeah, or if there really was a symmetrical idea, like you know,
or
being
if there is
embedded in the trees.
Yeah,
you know, that's one reason, but you're also not giving us any hints as to how that space is used, right? Right now it's like ballroom dancing or something. So yeah, I think you just have to help us by articulating why that's important. And if not, I agree with Sergio, you break the rule.
Yeah, I don't mind the symmetry. Just like either break it or say why I need both spaces. And Professor Jenisch just answered that, right? One of these is private, nestled in the trees and looks up the hill. And one looks out this expanse along this pier. It's it's a nice to have the two conditions. I know people that prefer one over the other, right? I wonder if the entry sequence has to also be symmetrical. Versus coming into a middle building and then symmetrically with equal weight, either going to the right or the left, as opposed to, I would challenge you to like curate a sequence, right? Hopefully, like, I don't know, like the power of an architect is to craft that sequence, right? As opposed to kind of give it up to the user to either go to the right or to the left.
That was actually intentional because I personally saw both spaces as equal in value. So I thought it would be better to let the visitor decide which one they would rather see first.
Well, the thing I like about that is so far your sighting is the only one that, gives that detached view of the landscape from the one that's in the water that, all of the other ones we've seen so far always give that view of the water, that detached view of the water, and the water is sort of the focal point, and you're kind of giving this dual focal point depending on where you are, where you can be in the water and get, the landscape view, or you could be nestled in the landscape and get the, the water view. So I did like that. And then we're always trying to break your rules here. It seems like, because my thought was, what I also think that your, entrance on axis in the middle, that symmetry, I liked it a lot. And then of course I want to sit here and go, well, what if your entrance building engaged the walkway in a different way, since it did have a different program? And so that way maybe it starts to like, come, I'm drawing on your axon. But like, even if it's not encompassing or making the walkway interior, because I think that might take away from an experiential quality that you had already set out. But like, what if it just engages that in a different way than the other two buildings? Then there's a very clear, all the rules are kind of it's the same setup, but the rules are a little bit different enough for that middle building with how you access it, at 90 degrees and how it engages with the walkway, that it becomes its own, its own little thing, both, while you're using it, as well as sort of like a, a party.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing about whether it engages in this direction, on purpose. Like this is about 360 views, right? And this is all inward. It's the reverse of that. And this third one can be benign and can kind of do none of that because you want the other two to place more strongly. But I think there is an attitude in placement and in kind of approach, right, that suggests maybe this way. So maybe that has to do with how you use fenestration and openings to address, or maybe like, I don't know what you're suggesting, Tony, but it could be like a wall that comes out, or a piece of the roof or whatever. Yeah. Oh yeah, over and down.
Yeah, maybe like some kind of, everyone likes to do the waterfall, maybe like something with the roof, so it plays a little bit differently with the elements you've created.
That's the timer. So last comments. I think I like the subtle, sometimes I find symmetry stronger when it's juxtaposed against something that's asymmetrical, maybe. And I wonder if this is a nature center either. I know you're going to freak out about this one. Like, I was wondering if there was like just an angled wider deck that maybe, and it could even be wider, like that started on one side and ended on the other side and kept the rest of the building just like it. It might give us more space to, I love these bridges. I kind of want to hang out here a little more, and look at the water and behold things. So if anything, I would widen it. And maybe the strength of that symmetry might become a little stronger if I put this sort of wider pier, and it could hold your outdoor classroom. I forgot. I think you told me where it was. I didn't hear where it was, but maybe then the outdoor classroom could be on some of these outside places, or who knows.
Yeah, and the thing I always say 500 times, but I think it's integrating this with, it's such a strong point of arrival. If we're looking at the site plan again, then how are we tying into this existing network? Do you want to continue the severity of that, right? Like, and it's just like, bam, it's the whole way, that's how you're coming, or is it like a meander over to that point? So I think those could strengthen your idea even further to build on the approach. Okay, thank you, Chris. Going to Lauren.
Hello.
It's over here. The third project from the left. Take it away, Lauren.
All right, so during my visit to Jefferson Island and when analyzing the maps after, one of the things that stood out to me was the footpath that visitors had already made just by like walking the perimeter around the island. And it really made like the water's like edge pop out more, and kind of it made it seem like almost like a barrier, which inspired my first design, which I wanted to allow people to cross the barrier of like land and water. And so I had the idea of just like basically splitting like a building, just like half over land, half over water. And then I paired that with one of my other design ideas that was to kind of reference the salt mine by creating like a long tunnel that is underground, but it emerges out of like the landscape. So and I like also like let in like a small like amount of like natural light at the very end of the tunnel. And so my final design was the combination of those, where the building provides the experience of being underground, but also it opens out to like open air, and like it allows like users to go experience being over the water too. So the entrance to my exhibit is my exhibit building is actually a minecart ride, and it's not like a Disney minecart ride or anything. It sounds kind of silly, but I felt that it kind of was like an interesting like hook and like an interesting way of like grabbing people's attention and kind of like allowing people to physically be transitioned from open air to underground, and also kind of allowing them to like understand like to kind of like experience like the space to the fullest, where it's leading you to a salt mining exhibit. So it kind of puts you in that mindset. And so although my building, like although the exhibit building looks really long and skinny, it's actually 40 feet wide. So it's not, I wanted to make sure that people didn't feel too claustrophobic, but to also keep the tunnel kind of feel and make people not feel as claustrophobic. And also like allow like little pockets of space to put like certain exhibits and certain things. I created like this interior wall of diamonds. You can kind of see in my plan. Yeah. That has a 6-foot doorway through and allows you to go off and experience like each like little pocket if you would like to. So there's like main like exhibit areas, and like off to the side and like little triangles, there's like video rooms where it's dark and you can kind of just choose whether or not you would like to go into those spaces. And the exhibit building leads out to a rooftop that's on top of my cafe. And it's kind of like an area where it's just like all open air, and you can kind of like experience like the nature to its fullest. And there's conversational areas, conversational like furniture areas. And to continue the diamond interior, I kind of made like the origin point, which is a diamond shaped staircase, I guess. And it's a glass staircase in order to not upset like the blocks stacked on top of each other. And so it goes all the way down to the cafe, which is completely enclosed to allow people to experience air conditioning if they would like to. and to kind of be away from the natural forces. And then that leads out to a dock, allowing users to be close to the water and experience just looking out and like kind of being even with the water. And then my last building on top is the disaster archive. And I continued the diamond kind of theme with the bookcases that are in there. And it kind of allows the little pocket or the little triangle shapes like off to the side to, for some like privacy if like you're there just like studying, but it also allows people like just visitors to come in and enjoy the view inside. And so actually those bookcases also transferred down through the floor into little that hold up the dock. So I just wanted like a way to like carry on like the diamond interior shapes throughout the building, because I thought that was like a very strong theme to continue on with. And I think it creates like a nice circulation and it creates like a nice like non-forced circulation, which allows people to kind of go wherever they want. But yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, perspective at the upper right is from that kind of under deck area. And then the sections cut through that reading room. Right, yeah. The short section.
What's the perspective next to the plan?
That's inside the exhibit space. It's kind of hard to see, like the shadows didn't really like work out and I tried to Photoshop it correctly, but you walk through, it's kind of easier to see in my model too. You can walk like under, like you walk like through like the little diamond spaces. So it kind of just shows how it's like a very open center, but it also provides doorways to each side. So that's what I was trying to show with that perspective.
I know you all get it from the other drawings, but I do think it's valuable to lighten that up or just use dotted overheads, right? So I almost want to like, erase like these guys, right? So that we can understand that pass through space a little bit better. You can always just use a dotted line overhead so that we understand that that X continues above.
I actually think that looks really, I guess, much more powerful, and I think it would actually work better in perspective when you're actually transitioning through the spaces as well. If you consider those doorways not as doorways in a wall, and maybe that they're just the walls stopping, and you're creating these nodes that are the pass-through points, as opposed to the 8-foot tall door in that wall in the two walls that you're going through.
Oh, you mean even like in the model, even if like they just go all the way up?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I shouldn't be drawing on the model too. Thanks.
No, that's fine.
And for me, I guess there's the rigor of the diamond shapes, but like I'd love to see maybe a study on those corners and how they're addressed, and if it's there's something regularized or some sort of more underlying order you could do, because like here these, if you did do the kind of the negative space instead of a pass through, but then these are solid, it's not going to feel the same. And then here you have the standard doors, and this is literally just the walkway creating the diamond shape. And then here you have the big openings that I think actually would work well for the the rest of the pass-throughs as well. And then here you have a small window. So I feel like if there's a little bit more order in how those things meet, they're going to read the same across, even if they're not the exact same thing. It's maybe it has a functional element where like all of those are the open ones and these are all windows, like this or something, or there's something going on here. And then the last comment I had, just while I'm talking is this is a really hard sell, this acute corner here. It's kind of a waste of space. And as you can see, you kind of have to like shove your desk and chairs up into there. And I feel like it could be really claustrophobic. And so my thought was, what if this building actually starts, to do something more with that diamond shape, maybe like a solid counterpoint, especially because it's at the end, at the end of the pier, but a solid counterpoint to your, void glass staircase column or something like that. I feel like not only would it sort of solve that problem with having these acute corners that square footage they have to pay to construct but can't really ever use for anything, and then you start to get a little bit more articulation in that volume of, I'm sorry, I was just scribbling on the perspective ahead above, but you start to get a little bit more of a sculptural quality to that one. Oh, and I did have one last thing to say, which was the minecart ride allows you to have parking remote from your site, which I actually think is an excellent plus to something like that. And obviously, I think you're right, school children would enjoy that a lot, but it has a really good functional element as well. In that instance, allows you to kind of keep this purity without having to butt a parking lot up against it. And I think that that's that's also a nice quality. Sorry.
What were these 4 spaces on the site on the building plan? The 4 little triangles in the corner about halfway in, those 4 red circles.
Those are just like my mechanical rooms and storage rooms. It allowed to have it just kind of, I thought fit in with allowing exhibit space, but also kind of behind the scenes stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you probably did that because it's too small and too hard to get to. And you're not supposed to know this yet, but mechanical and storage rooms love square space. Mechanical units are square. They have to have clearance around them. And I feel like, I'm buying, I've already said my piece about being enamored with plans. My suggestion was maybe if we just peeled off the outside walls, these could become maybe outdoor courtyards. And then I get a little hint, and I drew it poorly up in your perspective above the plans, that maybe you have this flat top and this bottom, and then I just take those walls off, and these are little balconies that start to hint to that geometry that's inside the building, but outside, right? It seems like 2 totally different buildings. This diamond plan, which kind of, like I said, a fixation with plan that we'll never see versus the triangular space, right? As architects, we're supposed to make space, not pattern. And so now those triangles are great little balconies, maybe peeking out on either side. You could even peel off the wall back on the plan in those 2 exhibit spaces. I guess I'll just draw a thin sort of implied glass line. Maybe now this is just glass. Then I can actually see through glass into that courtyard and that triangle from the side, and maybe even Tony was saying, maybe some of the triangles pop back out, right? So, and maybe there is this is a glass box that cantilevers out, right? So if you're and maybe there's some precious something in there, maybe it's a break room but I kind of want to peel and that would solve the things that Tony was saying where these angles are struggling. Just peel off the sides and celebrate these unique spaces, right? Because we're here for space that's made by this series of triangles and these juxtapositions.
Yeah, I really like that idea.
Yeah, whenever you sort of have embedded or conflicting geometries, these issues come up, especially with triangular spaces like we're talking about. So if you had come up with sort of a unifying or a resolving building unit that takes care of those awkward angular connections, that would have been one way to think about it, columns or something, shafts, that had some specific purpose. But I really like Andrew's suggestion of peeling back some of the rectangle and letting the the clashing geometries really come through.
Yeah, you see it. Then you'd see it a few ways on the outside, because you have it here, right on the site oblique, like at the top of the hill, that skylight, and then you'd have it here on the side, and then you also have it. You're seeing this diamond shape, and you're also seeing these, fins. So you start to see it in more places. I know it kind of breaks down your up, down, up box, but I think that's like the initial partie that can still survive a bit of carving and a bit of celebration of what's going on inside. That was time. Last comments? All right. Thank you so much. Thanks, Lauren.
I'm so sorry, my connection just cut out. But sorry.
Oh, did you hear any of that?
No,
okay.
my Zoom just like logged me out.
Oh no. Well, for time's sake, I think we're gonna have to move on. I can certainly share with you and reiterate the point so you don't miss it, of course.
And there's a recording.
Yep.
Okay.
That's
Thank
true.
you.
That's true.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lauren.
Cool. We're gonna talk to Saskia next.
Ruben.
Hi.
Saskia, where are you? Let's see. You're over here. All right. Floor is yours.
Yeah.
Go for it. Now you're
muted.
Sorry.
And that concludes my presentation.
Exactly. So when given precedence, I was most drawn to the like structures that were like slightly embedded into the site because they felt less jarring. And I wanted to find a middle ground between the heaviness of a mine and that kind of like softer embedded structure. So I started playing with wall thicknesses and material uniformity, and I made like the entrance. So then I made the entrance a solid concrete wall that drops down into like a deep dark hole, which visitors pass over using a metal mesh like bridge, which you can see in the top right corner. And then past that, visitors reach a lofted entrance floor that also has exhibit space. And the closer the observer gets to the edge of the loft, the higher the ceiling gets and the bigger the windows get. So at the very edge, there's just like a more open feeling. And then the mine cave, oh, sorry.
I said slow down a bit,
Sorry.
if you don't mind.
Okay. And so the mine cage, if you look at the perspective, it's lower. Oh, it's sorry, that's the path. If you look at it at the perspective that's below the one with the gap with the hole, it's hung from the ceiling in like the wide open space that's beyond the loft, the loft's balcony. And so it like kind of gives that like angle an exclusive view of the cage's interior structure. And so once you go down the stairs and you have a choice between going further down one more story. If you look in at the section, sorry, I think the share screen is lagging for me. If you look at the section that like there, you can go down one more story to the like the library, or so you have the choice of going to the library or just skipping that entirely, because I know that some people are not gonna want to go down and read books. And so you can also then you can head to the video exhibit. So it's a small room with sitting space. And all of these areas are void of any natural light because it has like a cave feeling. And then so past the staircase that leads to the library and then past the sit down movie area, the viewer enters into a narrow hallway filled with mine projections and sound effects. And so that gives you a very narrow, cramped feeling. And then once you exit that hallway, after being in such a confined space, which you can see on like the 0 floor, once you exit there, you enter into this big, large space, and you can see the underside of the cage, the mine cage. And then that's just more exhibit space. And that has like a very high ceiling. It has lots of natural light, which is supposed to be a relief from that cave feeling. And then you can exit that area, and you can go into like the cafe, and the cafe has like a side porch area that the cafe is all about looks, about like views. So the side porch area has like a view of like the old mine site, which is like being grown in, and it kind of has this, because before this everything was blocked, all the views were blocked by either trees or the actual structure. So this is finally like you get to the view and you have that view of that mine site, and nature's growing in, and then you can also go upstairs past there to like an upper porch area that has a view all around of the lake and everything. Yeah.
Will you give me 5 seconds on your party model?
Oh,
tell me.
Like the actual like first like models that we made, like the 3.
Yes, ma'am. The 2 physical models.
Okay. So I originally, when I first started out making this project, I made like kind of a uniform loop. So I took that and I just took like the overall structure, and I used like a thicker wood on the roof to kind of show that heaviness. And then I made the other volumes a lot thinner. Because that was an issue that I ran into, where I felt like my structure was too heavy, so I thinned a lot of things, and I tried to represent that in my model.
From that, how did we get to the like mirroring shed roof design?
I felt like my structure was just, as I said before, too heavy. So I wanted to connect the roof while also separating it from like the rest of the structures. And I also, if you look at the section, you can also see that I created more heaviness in the parts that loop down into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I made the roof's heaviest of all. I could have gotten heavier. I wanted to show that I wanted to play a little bit between like having that heaviness and having like the lightness of like the part that looks towards the old mine site is very much open, and I wanted to like create contrast between those 2 elements.
I love that little party model. Both of those are beautiful, and I love how clear the fold is. And I think I still see evidence of it. We can stay in that section, Nick, if you want. And even how you've sunk in the little courtyard. And then when you added the little light well to separate, the private from the public, right? One, when you become an architect, the last thing you'll be worried about is how heavy your structure is. You'll be thankful that it's heavy, right? That seems like an interesting thing to want to lighten. But I love that clear partie. And I think as a section, or as manifesting that, and maybe you can tell me you wanted your project to go to a different direction. If anything, I would sort of lean into that relationship and like maybe even shorten the overhang. Now I'm on the axon, Nick, to where that fold really looks like it's derivative of the roof surface, maybe, right? And so I really read that fold, and I don't know if even there's somehow, it's open here to where I can read that fold too. And I love that it becomes the ground plane. And then I don't know if there's a view looking back at that wall, maybe to finish it. I guess if you drop down to the section, it would just be to sort of thicken up some sort of piece right here.
Yeah, those little overhangs aren't doing very much for you, given how tall that first one is, or the bigger building is. And then the one on the cafe side, the fact that you drew in an umbrella because it only goes out 3 feet. yeah, to double what Andrew's saying, I think elements of the party could have really come out in the project a little more by eliminating those overhangs.
You can speak to that, Saskia, if you want, because that was the project to start. But I also understand in some ways your effort to develop the facade and fenestration, et cetera. You know, it's kind of a struggle between those two things. If you want to say anything about that.
Wait, sorry, what was that last part?
I know you kind of went away from that through your development of the facade and trying to lighten that up and add, you know, big open spaces and fenestration and stuff. And so it's kind of those two things crashing together. But certainly there's another party model you'd love even more, Andrew, that is a continuous loop. You know, that's like the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think she's doing you're here. I can say in second person. I don't have to talk in third person. You know, that this looks like a thinner material and it looks like it's set back a little. I think you're doing a pretty good job, particularly in the section of still reading that fold. And I love the section too, because it, like we talked about last semester, you've got, you know, smaller, darker archive spaces, and then you've got larger, you know, exhibit spaces and medium-sized public spaces, right? So there's a lot of sectional richness in this section. I feel like it's done really well. And in attempts to make the plan so thin, I think there's a lot of wasted space in that middle plan. And your plans aren't very legible. We need to, maybe they need to be larger next go round. But I feel like this middle wad that I've just circled in red is, you know, a hallway, and a hallway, and two stairs and an elevator. Like, it's 100% circulation. And I wonder if this fold is not necessary, could you maybe get rid of this and maybe it's just a big open space? I don't know. It seems just like a choppy sort of, there's better ways to use that space.
Yeah, I think some of the benches too appear like walls in that. So that's, I didn't notice that before. So there is like a more like a small, like more open room, but I think the benches make it look like there's like a wall. Like there's no, like the wall behind the staircase in that area isn't as thick. That like it's made thicker because there's a bench there. And then the one that folds back, that's also a bench. Yeah. Like that area.
Yeah, and you just wouldn't put shade those, right? So that helps us understand better what you intend.
Yeah.
And I think it's true though, also just the level of detail and maybe the size of the plan itself would help us understand those things better.
I think the last thing I would say too is if this stair is just to get you, go back to the section because it's such a nice drawing. If this stair is to get you to the deck, it's really the thing that sticks out like a sore thumb. And if you are kind of unsure, if you are not worried about circulation, you said like you have the option to go down to the archive, but there are plenty of people that hate books, so they're not going to go down there. And then if you're offering multiple directions, maybe there's a way to put a little mezzanine bridge straight out to it where I get to now be out there, you know, at a secondary condition, right, standing over this interior courtyard, and I end up on it. And then if you pan back up to the axon, that could be this beautiful, it could either A, come through the open spot, or it's a beautiful little pierce in that thickened wall, and it works me over to that, and I can go over to that spot.
Then you have a more traditional, cafe ending to your museum experience.
Yeah. No, that's great, because one thing I was thinking is that the overhang, I don't want to draw on Andrew's drawing, the red's so strong, but
I'll erase it.
No, I want you to keep it because it's a much stronger diagram than what I'm about to draw, which is just to illustrate what I'm pointing to. But this feels like kind of like hanging off the edge of the building feeling, even though I see that you did extend it, you know, into the building here. But if this had a strength that aligned with this as well. Then you start in section looking at these planes and how they intersect, because you have, the one that has its own rules doing this. And so your comment about, maybe something that has a connection reference, or actually physically connects it, like a mezzanine or catwalk or something, starts to give that its own character. So it doesn't read the same as, Andrew's red line.
What a great section.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Saskia.
Saskia, one last question. Was your sunken pit meaning to be the same volume as your elevator to the left in this section?
That wasn't intentional, but
it looks good that it is.
Thank you.
So.
All right, we're gonna move on to Ben C, who's back over towards the beginning.
Ben C.
Hello.
Hello.
All right.
The floor is yours.
Great. We can stay zoomed out for a second. I have a brief overview. So I saw the Jefferson Island site as a site of dualities. It has a rich past and present that defines the site's current context. And I believe that the pier site acts as a microcosm of the whole Jefferson Island site and context. The pier today can be seen through the remaining wooden pilings and ecosystems and habitats that have emerged around them. Simultaneously, it serves as a relic of the old salt industry and symbolizes by symbolizing the industrial past of Jefferson Island and the present. It also represents the present context of Jefferson Island as a bird sanctuary, gardens, and nursery for live oaks and other plants. My intervention seeks to highlight and engage with this duality from a respectful distance so as to not disturb the site's current ecology, while also adding and improving on the site's ecology through the creation of more ecosystems. That is just an aspect of my design. Obviously, that's not the whole thing. If we go into my site plan, which is in the top left corner, perfect. Yeah, so beginning at the site of the old salt mine entrance, a ramp brings visitors down the slope, providing screen views of the pier using the vegetation and trees that were added to and already existed on the site. My intervention, it also adds grass to improve the ecosystems around the water's edge, which is also seen in my first perspective, but we can get to that later. The path itself symbolizes duality as one side cuts into the slope, giving it an organic curve, while the other remains a sharp edge, reminiscent of human intervention on the site. It arrives at the pier at a sharp corner, which gives the viewer a look straight down the pier before entering the building. And now we can go to my first floor plan and I can walk us through the program. So I used a 15-foot spaced column grid inspired by the pilings, which divides the program into private spaces on the left, public and exhibition spaces in the middle, and circulation on the right. A screen view of the pier is also provided on the right side of the building using wood paneling. The exhibition on this level focuses on the pier, its history, ecology, and the birds, which I show in this call out of the Audubon books, which are an important aspect of the exhibition. So once you pass through this exhibition where you go from a theater space to there's a public reading room and a private archive to this exhibition of the books, you enter this kind of outside but covered area where you can see these doors, and you're faced with two choices. You can either enter this tower that takes you up to the second floor where you will find more exhibition, or you can take a break from the kind of circulation and very programmed like experience of the site and the building into this sunken area that's 2 feet down into the water, where there's more information on the pier, but there's also like seating where you can just take a break and relax a bit, which you can see in my section perspective, which is down to the right. It's the biggest picture. I kind of show the different uses I would imagine for that space, which are there's a person reading, there's a person looking at the piers, and there's someone just sitting down taking a break. Obviously, this would also be a good space for big school groups to come to. And in my section perspective, I try to show all the uses I imagine for each space. Like the, well, I can take us upstairs onto the second floor plan and explain the exhibition up there first. So the second floor focuses on the mine site and the overall context of Jefferson Island. So there's another video exhibition that would be like the disaster. There's a salt wall, the mine cage, the mine cart, and a diagram of the salt dome. And there's also screen views up here of the pier. And then before you step out onto this open platform where you'd get a panoramic view, you get the context of what you're looking at so that the view is much more important when you arrive at it. Also on the second floor, if you go in the opposite direction, there's a garden, a public garden, and a green roof. I chose this public garden because I feel like it represents the kind of current context of Jefferson Island as a plant nursery and kind of just like a garden also as well. And I have this call out of people interacting with the garden. But yeah, that's the second floor and its focus on the overall context. In my oblique to the right, you can see I've highlighted the exhibition spaces on the first and second floor and sunken area in this exploded axon. You can also see the different levels of and hierarchy of spaces. So the private spaces are 10 feet tall, while the public spaces are about 20 feet tall roofs. And that's the second floor is mostly public space and circulation. So it has a taller roof of 15 feet. Yeah, and then, as I said, in my section perspective, we can walk, I can quickly take us through that, and you can see people interacting with the video reading room, garden space, up the tower that unifies the two levels, where there's a stairwell and elevator, and the second floor exhibition. And then in my perspectives, which are down on the bottom, I highlight entrance, exhibition, and gala, which I imagine as being the one use of like the sunken outdoor space. And I try to show different times of day. I highlight the birds and stuff and the kind of environmental context of the site. Yeah.
Awesome, really nice presentation, Ben. Could you, for me, go over the entry angle and the purpose for that, or the reason for that? I missed it at the beginning, yeah. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. So we kind of have this, this kind of very angled slope down. The idea was kind of a meander that originally follows kind of the path of the old train tracks that would bring salt from the piers to the old refinery area. So you're kind of following that same path. Mm-hmm. And it kind of meanders through these trees, giving you screens and open views. And then like the kind of sharp edges kind of highlight that human impact, while the part that's embedded into the slope kind of has this more organic edge. That's the kind of more natural aspects of Jefferson Island today as it's used as a nursery and garden, etc.
There's a good example of that in the first perspective, right?
Yes. Yeah, in the first perspective, I show that kind of that organic side versus like that cut edge.
Okay. So it's about seeing also the site without the building sort of embedded into it.
Say that again. Sorry.
So it's about getting sort of a view of the site without, detached from the building in a way.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Just to finish up on that notion before we jump ahead, I love that idea of tracing the old path of this salt leaving, on this barge back up this pier. I feel like there needs to be one more strategy for tying it. I think one reason Sergio asked, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, because it's so different from the building.
Yeah,
and maybe if there was some strategy of maybe if this wall continued out, right? Or maybe if your pier system, let me do it on the plan, actually, if you don't mind, pan over one. Like I could see maybe even your pier system maybe coming out and whoops, I didn't mean to do that. And right, maybe now you pass through the pier system that becomes your structure, right? And maybe there's one in the sidewalk and they're in the landscape. And here's that wall. And I know it disappeared, but maybe it can stay up a little longer and we can walk through it. Maybe there's some way to really, instead of just so abruptly going from your craft to the building, there's some way they can start to sort of bleed into each other.
Yeah.
I also wonder about the articulation of the structure so strongly within the floor plan, if it's sort of a extension of the pier structure, because I feel like the circulation weaving within these really thick column piers is kind of like sleeping with the fishes sort of perspective of piers. I mean, I'm just thinking about how like people never really see the piers from that perspective. And I'm wondering if maybe the structures themselves get somewhat lighter, or maybe on the upper floor, you thin out every other one, since it's not too bad of a span for modern day structure to be able to span without needing them at 15 feet at that point. But maybe there's a way to transform it a little bit more so that it's not such a rigorous presence for every single human interaction out in the water.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, structure was something I was definitely thinking about a lot.
I know we've all agreed up until now. I wonder, Tony, like, I don't know, I'm intrigued by this rigorous minefield of columns, but they are kind of overstructured. If we go to the section, Nick, maybe there's moments like, have you seen Will Bruder's library? And is that in Phoenix? Where he has these columns. But then he removes the roof from the column, so light actually comes in around it. It's real counterintuitive, but I wonder then, and it's kind of maybe the answer to both I don't want to do it there. Maybe what Tony and I are both saying, that maybe at some points the ground is pulled away, and maybe this is an outdoor courtyard tube, right? And then you can just stand at this glass and look down at the water, and maybe some of these just pass through. Maybe some punch out and are in this nature center, right? I think I would sort of lean in and really start to articulate what these things do. That kind of segues into my main comment was, I know you're going to roll your eyes when I say Z-axis, but I need more in your Z-axis. There's such great opportunities to, either that's a ton of space. Why don't we pull this whole area back, and I can actually see the water below, and maybe two of those piers pass through. Do you see what I'm saying, Ben?
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, I did it exactly where I didn't want to, now that I saw what was above it. But maybe could this stop? Oh, wait, that's inside. Or maybe that could work. I don't know. What if this becomes glass and I could now look up and see the bottom of the mine cage? Or maybe this is glass, and I can look up and see the mine cage. And maybe this bench is actually the edge of something that opens down. And maybe there's even an opening in this bench that goes straight down, and really play up. I need that what these columns are doing, right? Which is sort of, creating this, I don't know what like a vertical grain that I think you could lean on and celebrate.
Sure. Yeah.
For how structured and ordered your plan is, your in section, the thicknesses of your slabs. If there felt a little thicker, I think what Andrew's saying about carving those spaces out, like that would read a lot stronger still. So going back and like thickening up, especially where you're showing some like roof garden area on the left over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's going to have to be several feet thick for both the root structure and the structure of the garden and the place for the roots, etc. So that
But
really
then,
gives you.
yeah, when you look at the poche of like your theater seating and whatever this elevator, and it's just the richness of that poche in this long section would really like give it some depth that I think, besides it being a perspective, I think that would really like anchor it.
Yeah,
I think it's the sign of a complete project, Ben, when we're discussing your slab and your structural thicknesses.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think it's a good drawing too, because it also, I agree with what Tony said, and you could probably have a less frequent column system, but
nope.
It does show that you,
it
does show that you have enough height there that while those are dominant in their organizationally structuring for your program, it doesn't feel, I don't know, it still feels generous enough, I think.
Doesn't feel threatening to you, Andrew?
No, you should see one of my student projects.
He hangs out under piers all the time.
All the time. He's like, I feel like home. But just to go back, I mean, your comment about, using the columns and starting to play with them, and also like that articulation of the light at the top that makes them, sculptural because the light would be washing down them, I think is very cool. A really nice way to transform them, as I was trying to come up with a way to do it, but you did it really cleverly as well.
And I stole it from Will Bruder.
It's all about the precedent. But also, again, because it's like an intriguing idea, your drawings are really great, and they really, help to, see so much potential because you have a really, nice set of drawings, and your model as well is. I like the model's really cool. I've been paying attention to your drawings and your perspectives more through the conversation now.
Thank you.
All right, last comments. That was the alarm.
Really nice work.
Thanks.
Well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the comments.
Last but not least, we have Eric, who is just to the left. And not doing too badly. We should be done by 5:10 or so.
You guys hear me?
Does Eric exist? There he is. Yes.
We hear you.
Awesome. So if we could start in the upper left. What was really attractive about this particular site here on the pier was in the left corner there, this kind of natural two piers that have formed. Obviously, the site name was about the man-made one, but next to it, from rubble and other pieces, has formed this more natural pier. And I thought that dialogue right there spoke a lot about the site as a whole, and should be focused on greatly. So going into the right there, you see the site plan, and I have a path that goes down through what is already cleared land for kind of parking, meandering along the topography down through this kind of wall of trees that has formed between the cleared industrial site and the water. And the view to the water is almost entirely obstructed until you punch through by entering the building in the back. When you enter the building, the first thing you'll see, you can go down to the section perspective, is this darker space with dark walls leading you into the theater space, which would introduce the Jefferson Island as a whole and a short bit of the history, with the left of you being this large salt wall, kind of imposing the industrial and rugged nature or rugged history that has existed in the site. But continuing through this building, you start getting these glimpses and first bits of light coming from what is the eventual view of the entire Jefferson Island, and can emerge out onto this rooftop patio green space that serves to bring the natural pier formed underneath the building up on top of the building, and can create a garden atmosphere out of what is native plants that are rugged and unorganized, and you can be used as a teaching space to teach about the nature that not only exists but what part it plays on things like bird migration, amongst others. Going down into the next space is where the things like the Audubon books would be displayed, and more light opening gives you a greater connection to the outside for an introduction into the wildlife and nature that has had a long standing in Jefferson Island, only to finally go down into the third exhibition space, which hosts its own series of models and artifacts to give the full picture of Jefferson Island. From there, you are at almost water level and can see across the water to where the disaster happened, to all the way around in the lake. And through pictures and diagrams and models, that space would be best used to understand how Jefferson Island has changed over the last 200 years of ownership and construction and destruction.
Because I was hovering on the section perspective, we just do the 10-second version of that while we're on the plan.
Yep, so you start up in the top there. This space out here would be this space on the first level would be semi-optional, obviously, but it would have the classroom and all of the a great stopping point to appreciate the beauty that you have just punched through to view. Then going down the series of stairs. Yep. Then going down the stairs, you're just going into the different spaces, the middle space, and then down to the lower space, which would hold the cafe and a second kind of sitting viewing area, with a final exit that is back by the elevator to go back under the building on an existing dirt path, which you can see in one of the perspectives.
Is the only way to get off the deck of the middle building into the building an elevator, or is there a stair?
Off the deck from the middle building? No, there's a series of stairs that connect each one. So from the middle building, you would go through and then down again. The elevator is obviously about accessibility. And
right, but so you're saying on the roof of the middle building, I go down this stair and then I end up out here on the terrain.
No.
Oh,
I'm
confused.
You don't leave the building. So from that first floor where you entered, you would go down those stairs and enter right into that second building.
So this is down this way.
Right. So then those would be connected, and then you would go down the second set of stairs into the third building.
Or you use the elevator, which you could represent the same way, because that's right here, right?
See that in the axon as well.
I guess I thought it was the other way for fluidity's sake, like I'm meandering and then I go that way, but you want me to kind of cut over and go the other way. I see.
Right, it would leave it as a distinctive space and semi-optional in terms of how long you stay.
It's a good point, though. You kind of have to wander around and then come back, but it helps you see the whole space, I suppose.
And doesn't this go down? Oh, I get it. Your arrow's pointing to the middle building, but it's going up.
Right, down is what you've drawn. The red is down.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe if he's talking about a sequence, he should always go in one direction. Maybe you should always go down, Eric, so we're clear. All right, looks like they all go up on yours.
Right, that was just a convention.
Yeah, I think I get it. Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I was confused about circulation too.
Since we're just talking about the drawings, the smaller images all the way on the top left for most of the left side of your presentation, when you change the direction that you're looking at them and the scale, it makes it a little bit hard to follow them. So like sometimes you have, the building in this direction, sometimes it's here and sometimes it's another way. So it might be easier to read them all together and see what you're showing in each one if there was a little bit more consistency in that orientation. And so I did have a question. So you started out talking about something that I thought was very cool when you brought it up, which was the pier and then the more natural one. But your building is laid on top of the natural one. Are you able to see the natural one from above the water at any point? I was wondering if like a glass bottom to the third building.
That's actually, yeah, that's the point of the third space down with the coffee shop and sitting areas that you then begin to actually inhabit what is already there. Yeah, you can see it in the plan as well. You begin to inhabit the nature that exists underneath the building. And in the first space, it is like artificially brought up to the third level or to the first level. But in this space, you inhabit what is already existing and kind of join it.
So how do you inhabit it? Is the ground glass?
Yeah, the
in
building
there?
is only sitting 6 inches off the ground, or off the water level. So you are.
But really, it's an adjacency. I mean, you're not bringing that. You're not, for instance, making a cutout here, right? So it's just it's just different strategy. I don't know if that's what you're after, Tony.
Yeah. So in my mind, and this is more of just like the way we kind of have to approach new construction and historic buildings whenever we have to look at guidelines and things, is one of the questions you ask is the new design or the new building overbearing to the significant historic fabric? And I feel in this is just the natural buildup pier that you started out with talking about, as opposed to the piers next to it that are more of the man-made structure visible, was a significant feature of your site. And so I feel like right now your building is like, especially because 2 of the 3 buildings, as well as your walkways, are laid on top of it in such a way that you're not only not interacting with it, but you're blocking it. And so I was wondering if there is a way to tweak that so that you're maintaining the significance of that feature, which you're using, as kind of a focal point, whether it's slips to the side or whether, like, I know I kept saying like a glass bottom, but like if there is some way that your building is slightly subservient to that, to give that hierarchy of significance to the landscape feature that you're kind of using. Because like, yeah, exactly, in that drawing that's up on the screen right now, if it goes from here to here, you're sitting on top of half of it and you can't even interact with it or see it. And here, right now it looks like this is just kind of I was going to the axon next to it as well. Like it's just sitting on top of it and it's perfectly wide enough that you can't see anything. And all you can see is like this amount of it. Does that make sense? And I think it's a cool concept. That's why I want to see this from your building. I want to experience this item, this thing that you felt was significant about the landscape, because I do think it's a nice approach to be able to really explore the man-made and the natural and how you interact with both of those. And it's clearly a focal point to everything that's happened in this area too. So I think on a larger scale, conceptually, it's something that's really worth exploring.
And then isn't it out here in real life, like in the axon? Isn't it just missing in the drawing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. No, I get it. And I feel like maybe that last stop, this cascade seems pretty important in your project. I kind of want to just, like Tony's saying, make that last cascade and be precariously out on that thing, right? As the fourth step is maybe your actual is that you actually create a room out there by just being on the end of the peninsula, unless that's a different project.
There's an artist, and they've done it several places, but one of the places was the Saatchi Gallery in London, where they had like this walkway that went out in a room of oil. But the thing about the walkway was it had the walls that came up to about like elbow height, and then the oil like went right up to the edge. So you're walking out into this walkway that's completely getting surrounded. And I just feel like if you were to transfer that to a similar situation here, where you're like walking out into the water, and you can even have the water, come out, so you actually feel like you're slipping down into this. I think it would be, another way to really show your intent, which is to inhabit the landscape, and also a very cool experience to kind of start high and make these slips down.
When you said artist, I thought you were going to say Donald Judd, and like we make a Marfa box, like a fourth box, but it's just a framed view, putting you right on axis. And maybe it's just a U, it's got no floor, so the floor is this peninsula. To really.
That's cool.
I had to look it up. It's Richard Wilson. If you wanted to see it, it's not the same thing, but just kind of conceptually as like an experience. But I like the Donald Judd one too.
I think from the sides, like I was saying with Ben's render, I think like just by elevating them, you are giving it some space, right? And you're referencing the kind of land water connection, and so it's sensitive to it sort of from the side, but the whole experience of the approach and the building itself is really being on top of it. And so I agree that unless you switch to a circulation system that's kind of like beside, it's a good way to explore. And even if you wanted to be more sensitive, where it's like, I want to look, not touch sort of thing, there's plenty of precedents of ways to have raised walkways and things where you let the native grasses and plants and stuff remain, even bird nests and things like that, but you can still observe or be in and close to.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'd say is like this, when you do this metered box, I think there's ways to have a sectional hierarchy within the box. When you look at the full building section right now in this drawing, it feels like every space, whether it's a lobby, a gallery, or an office, is the exact same height. And maybe, for example, I think this middle plan, these are the offices, or they're restrooms. So I wonder if maybe, just simply by maybe giving those boxes their own ceiling inside that space in the section, suddenly maybe there's a nice way of conveying that linear nature that maybe I see that ceiling sort of soar past if you zoom in on the building section, Nick. Right. That, then I could start to maybe have a little more sectional hierarchy and understand that maybe the bathrooms don't need to have the same height of a space as do the lobby. And then, just maybe offering a little bit of richness there. I don't know if it would if it would mess your game. I know it's a real clean one. If we started to maybe lift up at some hierarchically important spaces where maybe someone could stand on the balcony and look in. Again, that maybe is starting to be a different project, Eric, than yours of this rigor. But I'm trying to find a way for us to understand at a spatial level that galleries and offices have different spatial hierarchies to them.
There is a language potentially of cuts, right? Like you're using these areas in your perspective to bring the nature up to our level, but there could be cuts and additions, right? And
that's a great point.
Maybe it's seeing through horizontally in some places, like Andrew's talking about, but maybe it's also just your z-axis, kind of what you were doing for Ben's project, which is more moments of connection between these three, because in section it really reads, but we don't actually experience the building that way from the side. And I feel like it'll be a nice surprise when we get to the end of this thing and there's more, right? There's more descent and there's more to go, but maybe we can sense that from afar a little more easily.
I'm intrigued by that. Yeah. That was a terrible drawing.
So we're at time. Any last comments? And then if not about this project, if you have any thoughts overall, but let's start with this project. Any last thoughts? All right. Thank you, Eric.
A couple
go
tweaks, Eric, to your plan to make it read a little better. And then all the things we were saying about the section. I think it's a strong project. I think some things are just getting a little lost in representation or the way they're organized.
Yeah, it could even use some like of the simple color tones to understand the programmatic pieces or the flow through or what have you. All right. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, no big pressure, because I think some general themes have emerged, and I appreciate everyone's attention to all the commenters' attention to site and making these essentially at this level of development. It's like a party building, right? It has to work, and the hallways have to work, and the stairs have to work, but we want those big ideas to come through, and I think that's what you hear in these questions is. Go back to that original idea, go back to that party model, go back to does your idea still work now that you've jammed a bunch of program into it? How can we make this clear through structure or through a material application? Let's keep those central ideas as clear as possible. So if there are any other concluding thoughts.
Yeah, but y'all's group as a whole did a great job, I feel like, of like your focus was at the beginning, Nick, of tying into the site and understanding that. And y'all probably know the reason we're on these mountains is because it's one of the only places where section exists in the state of Louisiana, right? And so I think the segue would be is don't forget that, just as you had to negotiate a building traipsing down a sloped site, that a building section in itself also has a hierarchy to it. And that, that z-axis is just as important. And the section, I could argue and will, that it is more important than the plan. The plan is not precious.
Especially when your next two projects, you're given I don't know. I actually don't know what the next in the sequence is, but when you're given a corner lot somewhere in New Orleans that's flat, don't leave behind the richness that you've developed here.
Brilliant. Yeah, better. Said it better. As usual.
You good, Tony?
Oh, I just wanted to say, thanks, Serge. I just wanted to say thanks for letting me join y'all. And I mean, as a whole, the strength that you each have very strong parties. They are very good at conveying your intent. And I think that's incredible to see in a studio as a whole. It really shows that, you each took your own approach. And I feel like there is just a lot of really interesting points of view and the way that, certain ideas were developed and articulated. And I know that you're probably sick of hearing it, but I do think that it's no small feat that this work and the clarity and focus it takes to do the different schemes that y'all have done was done during a semester with so much upheaval. I mean, I think that that's an incredibly valid thing to recognize, and I really appreciate it. I think that I just think that you obviously still brought your focus and your dedication to these projects. You can see it at this stage of design development with the rigor in your party, and I think a really clear overall statement of intent from each of you that does get reflected in the design. So thank you.
Yeah, and to second that, I just finished teaching second year at LSU. Struggles with the semester, and really impressed with the level of work and detail and rigor that all these projects show. So really congratulate everyone for getting there this semester. And maybe just once you get to a certain level of completeness, stepping back from the work and trying to look at it from a fresh perspective and making sure that the big idea that you really fell in love with early on in the project is still there if you want it to be there, and if it is still there, making that really clear. So great work, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I won't make you talk to me right now, but we'll probably meet one more time. But thank you all. Does anybody else, y'all have any questions? Everybody's good. We'll talk
At least
later.
Their Arial font is good.
Very consistent, well aligned. Thank you, guys. We'll talk soon. Thanks again to the reviewers. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck with the end of your semester.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, best luck.
No.